Yeah, I mean, so you think it, do I go standby or do I go time?
That's right. There's a song about it. Came back and I won't sing. But,
Can you hear me? Oh, hey, we have audio. All right. It is now 6:24. Chris, are you ready? Okay. I'm going to call the meeting to order. I do want to let board members know I have to add one item under board management and governance, item H, to share the timeline that Nate sent yesterday. I just want you all to have a look at it. So that'll be item H. So before we get started, I also did receive some more information I wanted to share with board members. I received some more information about and clarity about the public comment period. Parents can speak about their own children. It's important for board members to know that it is our job to be sure our actions don't violate FERPA, since those, the FERPA restrictions apply to us, just like the other statutes and laws. So that means in order for us not to violate those things, we can't record in our minutes or on the video any conversation if a parent chooses to speak about their child. So if somebody wants to speak about their child, we have to shut the camera off and stop the minutes. And with regards to complaints against employees, as employers, our employees have the right to hear complaints against them and have the opportunity to respond. Since the board meeting is a meeting to transact board business in a public setting, the public comment period does not provide opportunity for our employees to respond. And since we strive to treat all our employees in a fair way, personnel matters will still not be discussed in public session in the interest of protecting our employees' rights. If the board would like to consider a course or a path to answering about this, we could codify the process in a policy. Right now, some of it's outlined in procedures, but we could consider codifying it in policy. But until then, we must follow what we have in place right now. So I just wanted to let board members know that. All right, and we have a full agenda, so we're going to have to keep things moving. So I'm going to pass this over to Kristen. I think she's going to share a few things before we get started, and then we'll walk the mic around for everybody.
So yes, I'm just going to say what I said last time about public participation, and that if you're on Zoom, please stay muted during the business part of the meeting until you're called on to speak, and that we're just starting with public discussion this time. And we'll have you raise your digital hand to be called on to speak, and we'll have someone monitoring Zoom, although it can't be Andrew because he's not here this time. Sorry, Andrew. And when you're called on, whether you're in the audience or online, please share your name and town or making your comments so we have that for the meeting minutes. And keep your microphone muted if you're on Zoom during the business part of the meeting. That really helps. And we really need to get through our business portion of the meeting. And please let people who are speaking finish their comment before you talk. Thank you very much. And again, I think Don explained about personnel, talking about personnel. And we did send out something today which outlined, or did you talk about that? Which outlines if you have a complaint about personnel, what to do. I don't know if everyone's seen that yet. We put it on Front Porch Forum, and I'll put it on Facebook. Sorry. And hopefully that clarifies for everybody what parents are asking about last meeting. And so that will be on the website. I'm not sure if it's on the website yet. We just put that up this morning. And so that should help parents be able to take those actions that they see that they need to. And I think that is it. I also wanted to share what the kids here at Moncton are expected to do, which is the pause, right? Thank you. Which says, have a positive attitude, act respectfully, work hard, and do safe choices. So I think when we're here in this school, we could all try to do that. I think it would be a good thing, because we do want to respect the space in Moncton, so thank you.
Okay, do you want to walk it around?
Sure.
Is there any, we'll move to public comment. Is there any public
sure.
comment in the room? Give your name.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Marr, and I am the co-president of the Mount Abraham Education Association. I am also a resident of Bristol, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Mount Abraham Education Association leadership team. We were highly encouraged to hear last week, and in the statement that the board provided today, that board members recognize the need to learn more about conditions in the district from a wider range of constituents in order to be more fully informed. We are eager to open up a dialogue with the board concerning the safety and security of students and staff throughout the district, among other issues. We would like to repeat our earlier request that a channel be established to allow the periodic routine sharing of information from MAUSD to the board. Our district and others are facing the fact that some of the most vulnerable students are not receiving adequate social, emotional, and mental health support. Our district has presented some plans, but there are many steps to implement to get the needed supports and resources in place. And MAEA wants to ensure those plans do happen. The multi-tiered systems of support and the coordinator coaching model is central to how our district provides support services to students. The model has merits and shortcomings, and the district, I think it will be addressing these as more data is provided about student outcomes. But we wanted to suggest that given the need for directing more resources toward the social, emotional, and mental health issues for some students, and given the challenges of hiring, we ask that the district administration and the board consider having staff that are already employed at the district, such as school psychologists, possibly coordinators and coaches, increase their direct service time with students during this time when it is challenging to hire staff in the spirit of all hands on deck. We also ask that the administration and school board ensure that COVID relief monies are being directed at bringing resources to the students and families who need additional support. Thank you very much.
I think I saw Nancy next.
Hi, I'm Nancy Cornell from Starksboro, and I just wanted to tell you how excited I am to see that you're going to be discussing school advisory councils tonight. As many of you probably know, school advisory councils are a topic that we've been talking about really during the formation of the school district, during our Act 46 study committee meetings. And I have always felt, and certainly feel now, that establishing those councils in a flexible way is one of the keys to rebuilding the trust and confidence in the school district that I know is really important to you. I would also say that, you have a community engagement committee that would be well equipped to work on the development of those councils and helping you work through that. And I hope that you'll rely on that group for that, because that group certainly has talked about that early on in its formation, and has believed that that's a very, very important, has seemed to believe that's a very important piece of community engagement, but has chosen up until now, has decided it needed to put that on the back burner. But I hope it now comes to the front burner, because it is one of the keys. So thanks.
Thanks, Nancy. Oh, you can just stand right there. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Wendy Chase. I'm in Bristol, and I am going to answer Mary.
My name is Mary Dearborn, and I'm from Bristol. Try to keep this pretty brief. It's just kind of touchy base on what Elizabeth said and what Nancy said. So the National School Board Association defines a local school board as, quote unquote, the community's voice in public education providing citizen governance and knowledge of the community's resources and needs, and the board members are the policymakers closest to the student. In addition, the school board is accessible to everyone in the community and is accountable for the performance of the schools in the district. We, as taxpayers and parents, will be herein referred to, for the rest of this, as the ownership of the board. After thorough review of the MAUSD mandatory board policies, we, the ownership, would like to report Policy Title 2.1, Treatment of Current or Prospective Students and Parents' Guardians. With respect to interactions with the currently enrolled students and the parent guardians of those applying to be students and their parent guardians, the superintendent shall not cause or allow conditions, procedures, or decisions that are inequitable, unsafe, untimely, undignified, or unnecessarily intrusive. We report noncompliance. Policy Title 2.2, Treatment of Staff. With respect to the treatment of paid and volunteer staff, the superintendent shall not cause or allow conditions that are unfair, undignified, disorganized, or unclear. We again report noncompliance. Policy Title 2.8, Communication and Support to the Board. The superintendent shall not cause or allow the board to be uninformed or unsupported in its work. We report noncompliance. Policy Title 4.2, Board Job Description. Specific job outputs of the board as an informed agency of the ownership are those that ensure appropriate organizational performance. Accordingly, the board has direct responsibility to create the linkage between the ownership and the operational organization. We report noncompliance. Policy Title 4.5, Board Members' Code of Conduct. The board commits itself and its members to be ethical, businesslike, and lawful conduct, including proper use of authority and appropriate decorum when acting as board members. Accordingly, members must demonstrate loyalty to the ownership, unconflicted by loyalties to staff. We report noncompliance. Steps that need to be taken by the board to establish compliance are the following. Provide the necessary resources and support so that all students and staff feel physically, socially, and emotionally safe. Direct and timely communication to parents, guardians, and families when there has been a clear the halls command in the school for which their child or children attend. Allow for classroom teachers to have a seat and a voice at the table. Establish a direct line of communication between the board and the Mount Abe Educators Association. Build future budgets from the classroom up in each individual school with the guiding question, what supports do our students and teachers need? Recognizing that to provide equity across the district, different resources and personnel may be different in each of our schools. And finally, and most importantly, proactively seek, listen to, and utilize and value the voice of the ownership in board work and decision-making, because it is the voices and stories of the ownership that provide an outside viewpoint from that of the administration on issues that have directly impacted families and our students. You, as a board, are elected by the ownership to be our community's education watchdog. You are not here to make friends or promote your own agendas. You are here to represent us by doing things that may otherwise be hard or painful. You are here to hold the administration accountable, and we are here to hold you accountable.
Anybody else? Thank you. Do you need this?
Is there anything on Zoom? I'm not looking at anybody.
Yeah, everyone on Zoom.
Let's go.
One more time, anybody on Zoom? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Our next item is, we're in need of an executive session under Title I, VSA 5313A7, academic records, suspension or discipline of students. We do not need to establish that premature knowledge puts us at a disadvantage for this one, so we just need a motion to go into executive session and invite the superintendent to join us. We will then leave this room and go down the hall to one of the classrooms we saw on our tour and discuss, and then we'll be back. I don't expect this to be more than 15 minutes, if that.
Can I bring in my laptop?
My laptop's already there
And you
and
have a
ready.
mic. And you have a mic.
And I have a mic. So, yes, so if someone's willing to make the motion, I'm going to Sandy. All right. Kristen? All right. All those in favor of going into executive session under Title I, VSA 5313A7, academic records for suspension or discipline of students at 6:39 with Patrick invited, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, we'll be back. All right, sorry, it took us a little longer than we anticipated. All right, so back to the meeting. Our next item is the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Steve? All right, is there a second?
One second.
Sarah? All right. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Two opposed. So,
That's me.
okay, then I need to see who is in favor. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, and Andrew, 7. Okay. And then 1 abstention and 2 noes. So the consent agenda passes. Next.
3 no's.
Oh, sorry, 3 noes. All right, next is executive limitations and monitoring, a discussion with the Hannaford Career Center Superintendent Dana Peterson. Do you want this, or do you have a teacher voice?
Well, with this on, I gotta use that.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. And I will share my screen so that I guess everybody will be able to see up there momentarily. And I'm all set. Share screen, presentation, share, and now, we're good to go. All right. So it's October 26th, and I'm in the Moncton Elementary School, not Moncton High School, but my apologies, I thought I was elsewhere. So this is our general, well, let me just say good evening, I already said that, but now in my 5th year here at the Career Center as the Director and Superintendent, and I'm just very excited to be here and sharing our collective story with you. So highlights from this school year. I have quite a few, and I'll try and go through these very, very quickly. First of all, our automotive, diesel, and construction tech programs are all full, and that's wonderful. It's unfortunate that a few students weren't able to get in, but that happens when we have very popular programs. Our medical professions and industrial design and fabrication are very close to being full, and that's wonderful as well. We even had to open an additional section of pre-tech in mechanical science this year. So we're very pleased to be able to offer such technical programming to our students at the Career Center. We continue working to serve all of our students from partner schools, and we're very pleased to be partnering with MAUSD, a very strong partner. Our student organizations are resuming both in-person and remote meetings. Those are going well. Overall, the students continue to be very cooperative and collaborative. The one thing that I will share that's a bit of a note of need for us, which I think everybody is well aware of, is that we do have some students who are experiencing some SEL impact of COVID in the last 2 years, and we're working very closely with all of our partner high schools to help address those needs. The students are very engaged both in classroom and co-op experiences, and our work-based learning does have to follow very stringent guidelines. And we are in conversation with the MAUSD administration about extending a partnership that would reach some middle school students rather than CTE experience, perhaps next year as a result of some funding that we have for their. This is basically the highlight for us, the preliminary work that we've been doing on our budget for FY 2023. And the total expense budget for the current year is $3,829,301. And the preliminary expense budget for FY 23 is $3,916,439. And that change from FY22 is approximately $87,138 over last year. So that's an increase. Revenues, we have not fully projected our revenues at this time, but we do. We have done some preliminary calculations and expect that we have about $79,000 in innovation grant support and some tax relief that we can apply. That almost makes up for that $87,000 increase, preliminary increase in our operating budget. Assuming a similar set of revenues for next year, we are calculating that our estimated tuition will be approximately the same. I'll walk you through this, but the calculated FTE cost right now is we're expecting to be flat at $23,827, which was last year's tuition. Now we still have a little bit of work that we still have to do, but preliminary indicators show that that's probably a fairly reasonable number for purposes. As I've said in the past, once we deduct our revenues from expenses, and as I said, we haven't fully realized the revenue projections yet, the difference is the amount to be raised for tuition for member towns throughout the county. All tuition costs are based on a 6-semester trailing average. That means payment is for students not currently in the Career Center, but those we're paying this year for students that were there last year, and next year we'll pay for the students who are there through this year, through the fall of 2021, so by the October 15th census. And so,
Move the mic a little closer. I think they're struggling to hear over there.
oh, my apologies. There we go. I just want to have it too close, but thank you. That calculation is based on FTEs of 132.52 for the fall semester. Excuse me, including the fall semester. Our FTE count this year was 147.25. When that is added to the other 6 semesters the last 3 years, it comes up to an FTE count of 132. You can see our trends along the enrollment trends for both semesters. And if you look over at the very end here, you'll see that we are over the 140 mark, and that is approximately where we were 20 years ago. I also did a snapshot of the last 6 years, from 2015 to 2021, and you can see that trend as well. We had 133, almost 134 FTEs, 6-semester FTEs. These are the FTE counts for at fall enrollment time. So we had 134 FTEs back in the fall of 2015. We dipped down as low as 123 in the fall of 2018, and then we have been on an upward trend ever since. And this year we're at 132.52. So almost where we were in the fall of 2015 for the 6-semester FTE count. Once again, some data on the 6-semester average. They fluctuated between 123 and 135 over the last 7 years. Right now we're at 132.52, which I've said like 3 times already, and that's at the upper end of that range. We hit a high in the fall of 2015 at 153. In the spring of 2017, we hit a low of 111.83. Those are not 6-semester averages. Those are the actual semester counts. So high semester count of 153. We're now at 147 and some change, and the low count of 111. In the fall of 2019, we also hit 147 FTEs, and this year we're back at that. Just giving you some data for Mount Abe. The FTE counts for the last several semesters were 40 in fall of FY20, 38 in the spring of FY20, last fall a drop, to 29.5, and now we're back up to over 40, with 42.5 FTEs for students from our area. Opportunities to collaborate. We continue to work collaboratively with all of our sending school partners. And PAHCC is actually in 2 cohorts for instructional leadership with Mount Abe this year. One is the Instructional Leadership Academy from the University of Washington. You may have heard some about that from folks here at Mount Abe, and also in the Leadership and Inclusive Education with Katie Novak. I'd like to put in a plug and a gracious thank you to both Mount Abe and Virgins, who have shared some of their ESSER monies to help us participate in the inclusive education with Katie Novak. Both Mount Abe, Virgins, and the Career Center are all participating in that training together. We're moving forward. We're moving forward with our CP2 within the IB framework, and our candidacy application is pending. And we're hoping that will get submitted by January of this year. We'll keep you posted. And as we discussed last year, we're working with all Addison County superintendents more closely during the budget development process so that we can be apprised of changes that are occurring and be able to plan for the FY23 budget in terms of support for the students that are attending the Career Center. Our outreach meetings now consist of 2, one in the fall and one in the winter, and those worked out well last year. We were following that same schedule, so we'll give you another update sometime in February, I think, to let you know where that all figures out. Questions?
Chris?
Yes. Hi.
Hi, Dana.
Hi, Kristen.
Are there any Mount Eve Middle School students attending?
Not currently.
No, so you said
We
you do
have-
some of that already with,
well, actually, no, we do have some work as part of our grant with Virgin. So we have Virgin students. We embed an instructor, and we would be looking to do that out here at Mount Abe. We'd be able to provide somebody for an introductory exploratory on CPE programming with some middle school students. So we've opened up some dialogue. Jay is helping to coordinate that with Shannon and Justin at the high school. So we're hoping to be able to announce something either for later this year or even next year. We will be able to provide some of those types of experiences for students. That would probably be here, but we could also invite students for short periods of time to come to the Career Center and explore what we've done. Yes.
I was listening to you share a presentation, a different one, and I thought it was really interesting. You shared that it was difficult last year because of scheduling and coordinating for people to get to class.
Yes.
So part of the numbers being lower, but that you found a way to actually pick some kids up and get them there yourselves. So,
Oh, last year, yes, we did.
yeah. So I was wondering how that worked. I don't know. I just thought it was a really interesting idea that you were able to do that.
Well, we were very committed. We had done a survey last summer to find out what barriers would prevent students from attending, and transportation was one of them. So we had some gear monies. We're not eligible for ESSER monies, but we used some of our gear funding to be able to provide transportation. We reached out, found out that we had, a dozen, maybe more, maybe 15 students who would not have been able to attend. And so we actually ran routes as far out as almost Heinsberg to be able to get some of our students to Career Center program. Now, they were able to, it was a great partnership because they were able to take the bus in one direction. We just had to figure out the other one. So sometimes they were able to arrive at the Career Center for programming in the morning, and we had to take them home. And then we also used that as an opportunity to do our runs, to pick up the students who needed to come to the Career Center in the afternoon and then catch their bus. So it was worthwhile, and the students very much appreciated it, and our staff was just so happy that they were able to provide something for the students to be able to to attend program. So it was a win-win all the way around, and we appreciated all of our collaboration with our partner schools to be able to at least provide transportation interventions. So definitely, thank you. Any questions from the virtual audience? I don't want to forget the virtual audience. Okay. Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate the time. Take care.
Thanks, Dana, for coming.
My pleasure.
All right. Keep moving along. Our next item is to accept the A1 ends monitoring report. Is there a motion to accept that so we can begin discussion?
Sure, I'll make a motion to accept the A1 and monitoring report.
All right,
Second.
second.
I'll second.
Kevin. All right. You want to start with questions? Do you have something you want to start with, Patrick?
I think I'll just start by giving a huge shout out to Katrina and the team for pulling together yet another really thorough report. I think what you'll notice in here is there are some successes that I highlighted, and there's more work to be done. And the more work to be done really reflects the non-compliance that I'm reporting. Where our student outcomes are not where I'm comfortable saying I'm in compliance. We can do better, we have to do better, and that's why I report on compliance. So with that, I think folks have had a chance to read this for a little while. I'm assuming there are some questions, so we can just turn it over to questions, and I'll lean on Katrina to maybe give a few highlights, and then she'll help answer questions as well.
I think I can probably use my teacher voice, even though it's a little rusty, just to give a little bit of context, the history of the report. So this is the fourth iteration of this particular format when a few of us still in the room, Nancy and I think Sandy and of course Dawn, participated in the Policy and Governance Committee training that we received from Val Gardner. It was very, very helpful to have her guidance because for years before that time, we were kind of cherry picking what data we were able to pick to help comply and satisfy the EDS monitoring report. So some years you would get a presentation on some of our science work. Some years you would get a presentation on our math data. She helped us really frame the fact that the board really needed to articulate an interpretation. So I draw your attention to page 3. That interpretation was drafted by that committee with that support from the trainer and then adopted by the board. So it was super important, and some of the key tenets to what this is meant to provide is that it's as much summative data as we can come up with, we can provide you. That it's the end of the elementary school experience and the end of the high school or K-12 experience that we are reporting out upon. So you have other grade level data in here as well. Obviously, this statewide assessment data is available to you, so we compile that in here. We disaggregate some of that by some of the demographic cohort groups. And then we this year have a few new sets. So you're going to see that there isn't comparative data for a few of the data sets in here. You may have already noticed on page 6, for example, we've provided some data related to senior students' reading proficiency scores. That's a first. We hadn't provided that before. The high school and the teacher leaders were feeling more confident in that data for last year, even though it was hybrid. They still felt pretty confident in the ability to stand by those proficiency scores in a way that they hadn't necessarily felt as calibrated previously. So that's a new set that we try to have next to that 6th grade reading data, so you can sort of see the 6th grade and 12th grade side by side in reading. Financial literacy is a different set of data that we've provided on page 7. We now have a course called Money Matters that all students are required to take in order to get their proficiency in financial literacy to graduate. There could be some flexible, independent learning opportunities to help achieve that goal as well, but for the most part, our 11th and 12th graders are taking that course. So we decided to add some of the data for that in there as well. Page 8, you're seeing the Vermont Science Assessment data for the first time. We obviously, I'm looking at last year's data, and we didn't have an ends monitoring report the year before because we didn't actually administer, we were not required to administer the statewide assessments in the spring of 2019. So this is the first time you're seeing that data, even though we had given the assessment the year before, but it was a first year, so we were not allowed to share the data. It was supposed to be calibrated at the state level. So that's why you're only seeing 1 year's worth of data on that assessment. It's not super new to us, but it's new to you in the report. And then just a couple other quick things. Incidental information that's throughout the report, that was a decision that we made sort of together and not necessarily a policy governance trained thing to do, but I had to snazz up this report. I wanted you to see some highlights from some of our alumni. We wanted to make sure the principals had a voice in here to be able to share and brag about the great things they're doing in their schools, even if it's not just for the 6th graders or just for the 12th graders. It still is an opportunity to sprinkle in some of the day-to-day for you to see what particular things the staff and the principals are proud of in terms of the work that they did last year with their kids. And then, of course, sprinkling in all of the pictures is always a fun, and I give a shout out to Jennifer Bauer. She definitely works really hard to format this, this booklet for us in a way that makes it hopefully easy to read, and it's a nice combination of the quantitative data, the qualitative data, and then just some, oh, I know that kiddo, or oh, it's nice to hear that they're still doing, you know, that particular activity in that school. So the most important part here is obviously Patrick's analysis. So we just combine all of this based on your interpretation as best as we can. If you see the flow of the report at the top after reinterpret, it starts with core subjects, as does the interpretation. It moves into what we now call transferable skills, and then college and career readiness, and then return on investment or resource alignment. So that is in direct coordination to your interpretation that you've adopted. I will just give one last shout out so that I don't have to hear my voice much longer, and that is just to say that I'm planting a little seed that even though that's the format of the interpretation, I'm hoping that sooner rather than later, within the next couple of months, the board can have a conversation about enlisting a committee again to relook at the interpretation in a way that can help us better align the data to the measurable targets in the strategic plan. I think we had a little blip clearly in the last year and a half or so to do that work, but I know that for those of you who were instrumental in the creation of the strategic plan, that came up a lot. So how do we use the ends as our guiding light, but now have a little bit of a roadmap by way of the strategic plan so that you can directly connect some of the data sets to a measurable target in the strategic plan. Can't say we can do that yet, but we would really need to get in front of a draft of an interpretation to help our teams figure out how to do that and see where we have holes and where some of this data would still be applicable anyway. That's my context. We did ask Mike to stick around for this agenda item as an opportunity for another voice to answer questions as it relates to how this data comes alive in our schools and what principals are doing with it, and also maybe answer some questions about what he thinks about the data. So not to put you on the spot, but if something comes up, Mike's here too.
Okay, I know 2 board members completed some worksheets, so I know there are a couple that might want to run through their concerns. Does it matter to the 2 of you which one I start with? Do we go first, or do you want to go first?
Okay, doesn't matter to me.
Okay.
I had a list of questions, but I'll stick to my most poignant ones, at least for me. I was wondering, like, would we be able to see comparisons of our data to other districts in Addison County. And some of these, we obviously have the MAUSD in the state, and then in some instances, national, depending on the assessment tool. But I'm just curious, and I ask this because I'd be really interested to see the cost per equalized pupil that is spent with learner outcomes as a comparison. So if we spend X amount of dollars in amount A, and these are our statistics as far as learner outcomes, and we look just to our west, and that district spends that amount per, equalized pupil, and that's their learner outcomes. I'd be really interested to sort of see that comparison. And the other piece that I had, I think that would help on the return on investment and resource alignment, I think, for some of our voters and owners. Another thought I had, and now I appreciate you mentioning, any longitudinal data we can have, I would love to see. I know as far as like some of these assessments, they're newer, the data can be released, but as far back as you can go as a new board member, you put in an appendix, and I'd love to look at it just to sort of see trends in our district, and then sort of map. You can start to map. Sixth grade, that sixth grade class was here, but when they're seniors, they're there, and hopefully that's a better place. And then maybe they were in sixth grade. I know as being a unified district for 4 years, we still have years to go before we might have that data, but that's something to think about moving forward. What does, on page 11, 1.7 dropout rate from last year, how many students was that?
I don't know off the top of my head. I want to say 2, but I don't have that in front of me.
I don't either. I think there's a nuance to a dropout rate that I think is important for context as well. And that is, at times, we may have a student drop out, re-enroll, drop out again, and that counts as 2 students dropping out. So there are, like there is with many data points, there are some nuances in the background that can be contributing factors.
One question, one comment. And then, I'm skipping back to page 9 now. There's a little box that says 85% of 12th graders. It's on the right-hand side, just below the picture. In 2021, participated in activities like sports, music, drama, and clubs. Do we keep tabs on how many kids actually work during the school year, like have jobs? So that might limit their ability to participate. I mean, because I'd just be really curious to see that, and whether those jobs are formal or informal, like they're working at a gas station versus, at home on a farm or something like that.
Right.
I think that would be interesting, I think, for the district to know, to see if, are there more kids we can pull into the fray, or actually 100% of our 12th graders are actually doing something outside of school that might be valued.
Just a note about that, we do talk about that quite a bit because this data isn't always the easiest to get, just the big picture, the big fall musical, that's an easy one to count, right? But the PLPs, as they continue to get refined, we do a pretty thorough interview process on the PLPs for 12th graders in the spring, and that could be a place where we could capture something like that. We have talked about it, it just hasn't come to fruition.
And even beyond working outside of school, other activities outside of school. So we don't have a school club that is horseback riding, and we have plenty of kids that ride horses. So continuing to look for ways to capture activities inside and outside is valuable. And this report is about the effects our school district has on outcomes for students. If our school district isn't involved in coordinating the horseback riding kids are participating in, talking through what role does that data have in this report is also important.
And that's the debate, right? So because you could also say that the ENDS policy speaks to ensuring that our students have the efficacy of pursuing a personal interest. So if we've done a good job to help kids feel confident to be able to pursue their personal interest, is that the correlation we could be making? But this is the debate. That's why you haven't seen that data.
Then, Katrina, to the PLP on page 15, the second to last paragraph, The last sentence says, this involves greater emphasis on using student data to make decisions. Is that student data the personal learning plans moving forward, or what student data is that referencing, Patrick or?
Yeah, in general, it's talking about various types of student data. When I wrote this, I was thinking about using SEL data that we're getting better at collecting and are now getting better at utilizing and making decisions using that. But I would also include academic data, not just the sort of summative data that you see, like with SBAC scores, but in our sort of routine assessments, some of which are in here and others are not, looking at student data.
And last but not least, sorry. The second paragraph on this page, you talk about, transitioning in our district to equal times of core subjects as far as the amount of time in our elementary schools. And my question is, have we seen, were there gaps in outcomes prior to implementing, the same amount of instructional time across the district in student performance? And if there were gaps, do we see those gaps closing? Or do we see other trends of schools that might have had more instructional time, let's say in math, and now they have less, or vice versa with reading or something like that?
Yeah, I guess my response to that would be there were gaps before, and there are gaps now. To be able to attribute, and the gaps are different, they're not the same gaps that we had before. So in some places the gaps have closed, and others they haven't. To be able to attribute that to a single variable gets to be really tricky because there are so many variables. I guess that's the best response I have to give you on that.
One of the things to be thinking about, especially as we embark on potentially an update to our interpretation, is, there could be other endpoints that we decide we're ready to talk about, right? We could say we want to see data at the end of second grade as well as sixth grade, so we could say at the end of their early elementary experience, what does that data look like? And we have other local assessments that we certainly use with our younger learners that we feel confident we're starting to be able to get reliable data from. So that could be something we could consider as our next iteration.
My two thoughts are that one is that education.vermont.gov, the VSBA did a data,
Did you shut it off? It's on the bottom.
Yeah, thank you, sorry.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Yeah, just have to put it closer.
The VSBA did a little data training, and so at education.vermont.gov, they do actually have the educational performance and financial reports and school reports so that we can dig in there and compare our district and high schools. The only places where they don't have that data available for us, and there's a search as well, so you can search specific places, is if it's too small. Sometimes they said sometimes when they get down to the school level, it's a little hard because it's difficult to not have student defining data. But definitely, I think probably our high schools, we could compare those. And this just reminded me that we had talked before a little bit about maybe we've talked plenty about wanting to focus on our ends and how to bring that into our conversations more. And so part of me is wondering, is it possible to break down the ends? Like, this is a big monitoring report, right? But if we could get maybe quarterly updates throughout the year, maybe, and because we talked about how do we see improvements, how do we see if what we've changed has improved the social emotional situation, right? So is there a way to somehow, just like the budget can be broken down and we get updates monthly, to start thinking about how it would be appropriate for us to get updates on how this is going throughout the year based on changes that we're making? I didn't know if there was a connection.
My comment was mostly about the conclusions, I guess you could say, of the ends policy. It's kind of binary. Either you're doing it or you're not. And it's a pretty significant charge to do what is listed in the ends policy. So it's almost like you gotta have to kill me every pass to complete all that. So I think it would be important to somehow have some step goals, particularly shortcomings that were identified with low-income learners or students that struggle, to provide a series of steps that could be termed to be successful or not across the series or a number of years, as opposed to saying we're going to become compliant someday, because that's a philosophical question, it's not a tactical
Anyone else?
So Candace might just be getting back to your realignment of the strategic plan and the interpretation. One thing that I noticed, in that interpretation page is the first two bullet points in our core subjects and under transferable skills are 6th and 12th grade survey data and 12th grade GPA proficiency scores. It's a little difficult for me to pinpoint exactly where that is in the rest of the report. I'm just sort of assuming that SBAC must qualify as that, or the MAP score must qualify as that, rather than that being its own little identifiable thing, where here's the 6th grade survey. That's what I was a little bit just confused, maybe by the labeling of it and how they're tied together. And I think that might be something that might be stronger in a later version. Just how use the possible evidence. Here's what possible evidence is. You can find this on page 5.
That's exactly what I hope to accomplish when we leave this in a better way, so that people can make those correlations easily. And yes, it is possible evidence. So we tried when you adopted this interpretation to not lock ourselves into any one particular assessment or data set, because we know that things change. The state assessments change. We currently, for this report, didn't have reliable 6th or 12th grade data. We are piloting a survey currently, so that I would hope you would have that in your next fall's report. You will have that in your next fall's report.
Right, so that was just a point of confusion for me.
It is confusing.
And I would assume you'd have 12th grade GPAs as a survey.
We have included that in the report in the past.
Yep.
It's a little trickier in a proficiency-based system to have that linear. I actually had to do a percentage in a range of their proficiency score, and it just didn't feel very reliable. But when I saw this again over the summer, I'm like, should I try that again? But especially in the hybrid model last year with the 4x4 schedule, I didn't feel confident in the data that way. But it is something to revisit in some other way. Providing you with more of the proficiency data, like we tried to do with the senior reading data and the Money Matters information, there are more data sets like that we could be providing. I'm just trying to get you the largest set of kids that I can, and when they all do different things, flexible pathways, it's tricky to find one reliably assessed data set.
Does that speak at all to how difficult it is to assess the PLP between students with a common ruler as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is challenging, yep. Work in progress.
Thank you. I was wondering, I liked in the end summary of the first section where, I guess this is your part, Patrick, where you talked about you looked at our data in both SBAC and the MAP results, so statewide and local assessments. So I think it's really important to appreciate the limits for the statewide and national assessments. And then the next section, when you disaggregated for free and reduced lunch, it looked like it was only looking at SBAC results. And so I'm just wondering if there's a way, I'm not sure if we address this question too, but to look at the local assessments for that as well. You know, again, recognizing the limits of the standardized tests and really showing students' growth. You know, could we look at local assessments for that piece as well? And could that also be done, I guess, that also includes, or would be in addition to students with special education services?
We would have to expand the number of grades that we were providing to you. We couldn't just share disaggregated map data for sixth graders. The N size would be too small for the percentage of kids who receive free and reduced lunch benefits. So that would have to, that would be a change.
Grouping.
Right, so that would have to.
Sort of get that thematic idea.
Yep, there would have to be a change to the interpretation.
And then I just had another question. At the beginning, you mentioned something about, you mentioned a couple times, like trying to find different ways to make this connection strategic with them. Sorry. And I thought you said something about a committee to do that. I couldn't remember. How were you envisioning, or who would be part of thinking about that? I know there was some from the policy and governance committee that did the initial work. I just wondered if you could talk a little bit more about that.
When I used the word committee, I was thinking about a reboot of the policy and governance or subset of the board to look at refining a draft new interpretation. But before that group were to convene, I would certainly want to get as much input as I could, and really looking at the local assessments that we use and all of those pieces to help give the board some ideas of other types of assessments and at what point in a student's career it would be applicable to share. I wasn't thinking of that as a committee per se, but that could be a great task for a reiteration of the SPOT, the Strategic Plan Oversight Team, because that comprised of so many different stakeholders that I think that could be a great vehicle to get some of that input. Just a thought. I didn't go that far. I was really just thinking about the policy governance piece.
Yeah, and I like that idea of board members who might be more data wonky getting a chance to dig in a little with you to learn more about what exists, what could work here, what might not work here. Thank you.
Andrew has his hand raised.
Andrew, you can next. Go ahead.
So thanks. I'm having difficulty reading or understanding the charts on page 4 and 5. So if I look at on page 4, grade 3, if I read across 2018, 2019, 2021, those are 3 different cohorts of students. Is that correct?
Yes.
So you don't really see. I don't understand how I understand growth if I'm reading, 50% ELA in Vermont in 2018, and then I go to 2019 and 50%. That's a different group of kids. To see the growth in a particular child or a cohort of students, you have to read diagonally across the chart. Is that correct?
Yes, and Patrick did some of that for you in his analysis as well.
And then on page 5, ELA met or exceeded the standard. So I think, looking at grade 3, the blue line is 2019, 20%. And then that same cohort is 4th grade. The green line, is that correct? Am I reading that chart correctly?
That is correct.
So that's the same cohort of students.
That's right. A celebration, actually.
Pardon?
I said that's a celebration that you just highlighted.
Yes, but it would be easier for me. It's not all celebration. I mean, I just have a hard time understanding if it were displayed like
this is a cohort of students as they go through school, first, second, third, fourth, fifth grade. What's been their growth over time, rather than this third grade versus the next third grade versus the next third grade. To me, that would be more meaningful to me in terms of how we're doing in our school system if we look at a cohort of students as they go through the system. Maybe that's just me. Do we not give SBAC at Mount Airy? I mean, at over ninth grade?
We do not anymore, no.
Okay, thank you.
Andrew.
Okay, can you hear me okay? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so I just had a question about the chart on the very bottom of page 9 about behavioral referrals. And I'm trying to make sure I read the chart correctly. It says for 12th graders, 97% had 0 to 1 referrals. So I'm looking at 0 means no referral, 1 means a referral. So 97% of people had a referral or didn't. Am I reading that right?
Yep, that's correct. Another celebration.
So I guess my question was, what are the percentage of folks who had just 1 referral versus no referrals?
So sorry, a suggestion would be to tease them out.
Yeah, because you're saying some people, 97% of kids, some didn't have a referral at all. Some did have a referral, only 1, but I don't know out of the 97% what percentage actually had the referral, right? So my first glance at that, I was like, whoa, wow, it sounds like there's a lot of issues in 12th grade for 2021. And I'm reading that and going, no, that's not exactly the case.
Right, so 97% of the 12th graders last year either had no referrals or they had 1 referral, right? And so then 2% of the 12th graders had between 2 and 5 referrals, and 1% of the 12th graders last year had 5 or more office discipline referrals.
Okay. So it's maybe just sort of how you broke it out, like 0 referrals or 1, not a huge concern.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay, that explains it. Thank you.
I think I just wanted to agree with what Dave was saying about the diagonal reading of the chart. I did spend quite a bit of time doing that myself, trying to draw the diagonal line. It would be helpful, even if there was a way to take maybe quite a few of these. It sounds maybe a little weird, but grab a few of these assessments and maybe lump them all together in a cohort combination number. It just said, okay, just in terms of taking assessments in general, doesn't matter what the subject is. So, in general, are we assessing from 6th to 7th to 8th to 9th to 10th on an upward trend, or assessing at level, or is it sort of hanging in there but slow decline, or just some kind of I think in trying to understand exactly just how effective the limited amount of time we've had with this new plan is working, which direction is it headed? When I do the diagonal stuff, I get lines that seem to fluctuate all over the place. Some of them, the kids look like they do great in the second year, then they decline. Sometimes they started out great and they fell during COVID and rebounded slightly. It seems to be all over the place. It's really hard to see what the general direction is.
I think, I guess, a thought I have along those lines, I agree there's value in looking at a cohort and following a cohort over time and seeing that trajectory. That's why I tried to tease some of that out in my summary, because I look for that as well. And it's important to look year over year, different cohorts. When our system is operating the way we want it to, yes, different cohorts have different needs, but when our system is operating the way we want it to, it will adjust to rise to meet those different needs. So we should get to a place where we can consistently see the kinds of outcomes that we want. because our system's responding to the varying needs. And so that's why looking at the data the way it's presented here also has value.
I can talk pretty loudly.
Can you hear me? Great. On page 15, probably this question is for Patrick, going to the second to last paragraph. So more recently, our work has remained focused on strengthening our multi-tiered systems of supports. I guess one of the questions I would ask is if you could elucidate what you think are also been some of the weaknesses and the things that you think they need to be shifted to make it so it's stronger. And what makes me think about that is during our retreat, we read Nate Levinson's book that he gave to all the board members, which I thought was very helpful in sort of understanding the concept of multi-tiered systems and what, as a district, I think, as a superintendent, we're trying to accomplish to create equity in the schools. And I noted, you have a system, but there's always challenges in implementing any system, especially if it's new and you're working on it. So. And we've heard about it a little bit. People talk about coaches. They talk about the effectiveness or not, immediate issues. And again, everything's a work in progress, so I do appreciate that. It takes a while to try to implement a system, but it would be helpful to know sort of not just supporting the strengths, but what appear to be the weaknesses and what we're doing to address them.
Yeah, good question. I guess where my mind is going as I think about that, sort of twofold. I think one is because we're still early in implementation of the systems that you're talking about, there's variation across schools in implementation. So some of the work that is underway, that will continue to be underway, is to continue to build toward consistency across schools. And there are lots of nuances in that idea of consistency across schools. Some of it is at the broader level, at the school level, some of it's at the classroom level, at the school level, and lots of places in between. In addition, I think something we're currently working on, which is an area for improvement, has been our ability to use data to drive instruction and to make decisions. And so we're working to get our system stronger, both in the data we collect and the conversations we have about the data, the decisions we're making based on that data. And there's a lot of efforts underway right now to get better at that. We're having a lot more data conversations in all of our schools. That's pretty new this year. It's definitely a greater focus this year than it has been in the past. I know I talk with Mike often about his use of data. I think Monk is doing a bang-up job right now, and the frequency and the way in which they're having these data conversations, and the way it's informing instruction and supports for students. So that's the other area that comes to mind immediately when I think about that question.
And that actually follows.
Great. And that follows up on my next question. I know that this report and the way that the interpretation is written is to aggregate the grades in all the schools together. But in trying to assess how the multi-tiered system is working, and consistency is good unless you find in a school it was performing really well and now it's really performing poorly, right? Versus a school that was performing poorly might now be performing really well, and trying to figure out, so what was missing, what was a deficit. It would be helpful in understanding how these, because we're responsible for each of the schools, not all of them. They're not one big school, but it's like each of us, each of the elementary schools and the middle school, high school. And so it's important from my perspective to know how our policy moving and supporting this direction is affecting each of the schools. And are we benefiting in one way but hurting in another? And I think that's also the data probably that you're collecting. But it would be, not for this, but I imagine also as we move forward on decisions coming up, it would be helpful to be able to separate that data.
I think just not to keep beating a dead horse, but obviously multi-tiered system of support is spoken to multiple times in the strategic plan. So in equity and also in social emotional learning. So I think again, going back to the interpretation and really giving some deep consideration to how would we measure that. It says 100% of students demonstrate success in a multi-tiered system of support, indicating that class, geography, disability, and gender are not predictors of student success. So how do we measure that? We need a baseline, and then we need to achieve that goal. So a multi-tiered system of support doesn't mean everybody gets the same thing in the exact same way. So how we educate both the board and the community in what those tenets are would be important, and then really figuring out how to measure them well to know where we are now so that we know where we're going is, I think, part of the next iteration of the interpretation of the ends.
Right, and then together with that, the qualitative piece too, because the data is important. But as teachers, we know when something's working sometimes and we can't put a piece to it. So as teachers, I expect that your experience will be like, this is working, let's figure out what that is. And it's not always necessarily, so it's externalities, right? There's things that aren't measured by data, but that are something that's sort of external from that data, to make sure we keep that qualitative piece part of it as well and give that value somehow. I agree, in the interpretations, we have to figure that out as well.
Yeah, I just want to thank Mike for the tour, and he gave an example of a grade here which has more academic needs. The moving resources and being flexible, to blast, I don't know what you said, something, that cohort with support and resources. So that's what you were talking about. We just have an example here of that, and I just want to add that I think we do need to talk about celebrations and successes also, which has been nice to hear now. And that, I mean, it's exciting to see that Mike wrote here that in Moncton, they're having the lowest behavior incident numbers in years. So, instead of reinventing the wheel, can someone from Bristol come up and spend a few days and see what's going on? And he showed us the system. Again, no need to reinvent the wheel. I mean, we do need experts and stuff, but we might have one right here. He said he had a lot of experience with PBIS in his last school. So I just hope that, that we're also using resources for schools that are having success with behaviors, things like that. And I think that's important. And again, we always know, and I've been on the board for, God help me, 10 years, that socioeconomic level of the student, is overly determined in the test score. So whatever we study, it boils down to that at this point. And I know that's what we've been working on for years. So everything else we might measure, that seems to be the biggest factor. And that's sad, and it's not okay, and people are working on it. But thank you, the report was excellent, and given what last year was, so thank you.
Sorry. Just quickly, I was thinking about, because we did have the comment earlier about flexibilities and roles, and maybe, because, I'm having a hard time imagining anybody that hasn't had to shift the way that they operate and be flexible in what they do and how they do it. The most extreme, obviously, being online learning. But so I do think that's interesting. To think about maybe using, I guess the question would be then, could you tell us more about Moncton and about how you, maybe just so everybody can hear about how you've been flexible and how you use data, and just some highlights from you would be
So, thank you. Nice things to say. We're proud of the work we do here, sure. I think from a data, there's a lot of things happen, right? And so I think I want to say schools are complicated. There's a lot happening. Those kids are different. What you get year in and year out in a small school is going to really dictate and tweak things, right? So there's always fluid. I think comparing year to year is tough. Comparing, you go 5 years by 5 years, you're probably going to get better data. That way you can move forward through the ebbs and flows. But I think here what we try to do is we try to take as much data as possible and use that to help kind of craft and shape those kids. An example I didn't use blast, we called it flooding. That was a Nate Levin thing. It was from his book. And we identified a grade that had for this school an above average amount of students who weren't where we wanted them to be. So I allocated resources during our win block to help get those kids kind of what I felt was like the academic support that they needed in a small group setting. I could only do it for that grade level. That's all I had resources for. But fortunately, it was just for that was our highest need, so we could pull it off. From a math perspective, I love the math testing, right? It stands for Measure of Academic Progress. It's run by a company called NWEA. It's in 40-ish states, so you're talking millions of kids. So it's a nice level of how we're doing on like a national norm scale. But it doesn't tell the whole story, right? We only do it 3 times a year. But for me, at those moments, it's a nice dipstick to see where kids are doing. You may get kids who do really well in 2nd grade based on that, and they take a math test in 3rd grade, and they're not doing as well as you think. You adjust based on that data, you adjust based on some in-class data, you take some other data as needed, and then you make adjustments as need be. And we just kind of redo that process over and over and over and over. The MTSS system is awesome. I did it in Nevada as well. It's a very similar system to what we did out there, with the idea being every 5-ish weeks, 4 or 5 weeks, you are reviewing students you have of concern in that grade level, and you are talking about what you have planned and had done and how it is going. So if you put a kid on a tier, I call it tier 2, a targeted level, it's kind of, you have your universal set your in-class supports, everybody gets them, and then you have kind of this next level of support called targeted. We talk about those kiddos, we collect data over that 5-week period, because that's your cycle of talking about the 5-ish weeks generally. How are they doing? Is it working? Is it not? If it isn't, we tweak, we change, and you're not quite throwing darts at all. Sometimes it feels that way, but eventually, hopefully, you're going to find something that works. If it doesn't, you kind of go to the next level, which is called intensive. I call it tier 3. And that's kind of that process that goes. And through that, you're going to ebb and flow. You're going to find things that work. And you're going to kind of take the data you have and make it work for you, so to speak. Kind of on top of that, I love the intangibles that I heard. Like, there are tons of things every school does that is wonderful. Adora, who's over there from Robinson, does things that I don't do that work for her. But every school is different. Every community is different. Sometimes what I do here at Moncton may not work for the kids at Robinson, let's pretend. But you just gotta kind of figure it out and find it. And knowing what that is really difficult. I think we can all agree that kids entering a school feeling safe and having their bellies full and feeling loved is important. You know, kind of those SEL things we can all get behind and do from there. But I think for me, it's continuing to hammer, continuing to try things, continuing to use the data to your advantage, knowing that sometimes you're going to have grade levels that fail, go down a little bit one year and then rise up the next year. That is the part of the system. The other hard part too is you take my school, if you have 30 kids in a grade level, if I have 30 3rd graders, and 4 kids do really bad on math for whatever reason, that really skews it, that really hurts your data. And sometimes that's an unfortunate look at schools too. So I think you kind of take the data with a grain of salt as well. I love comparing national norms. I love it that we are above state average. I love it that we are above national average in things. Like math, you can compare yourself to the rest of the country, like good for us. Like I love that we're ahead of the rest of the state. That is awesome. That feels really good. And I think that's something to be proud of. I know being here makes me proud, right? I've had 4 schools, I promise you, they exist. But we're doing good things here in our systems. You gotta give them a chance, and the MTSS is awesome, and we're building it, and it's working, but it takes a long time, and you're not gonna really reap those benefits for a few years, right? Like, if you have a kindergarten kid who comes in late, or whatever, they're behind, whatever, like, it may take you until 6th grade to get them on grade level. That's a huge, massive win. Which is why you have these reports, right? My goal and Adora's goal is to get kids on grade level when they get to middle school. Like, hooray, we've done it. You kind of let them go and their wings come out and they fly. But sometimes it takes that long. And I think if we believe in our system and we continue to stick with it and we don't change it or make little subtle tweaks, it's a proven, real system that works. And it's not just a non-aid thing. It's done all around the country. It's a successful system. So I don't know, I'm rambling, but I just, I use the data, we do our best to build, and we make adjustments, and we go, and we work with the team that the district has provided, and that's experts, and we rely on them, and they give us suggestions as we go. That's it.
In the beginning, Katrina, you had made a statement, and I just want to make sure I understood. Did you say we can't statistically support our ends with the data we currently have?
I said I provided you with the data sets we feel most confident in.
So that doesn't answer the question though. So the ends that we have listed, does the data we have support what we're doing or no?
Yes, the
Okay.
data, yeah.
Okay. My second question is, the students receiving free and reduced lunch that we have listed, all students are receiving free and reduced lunch in 2021, these past 2 years. So what are we really looking at for those 2 years? Is it the same group of kids?
It's the same eligibility criteria, so their families are still filling out forms, et cetera. So we still know who's eligible, even though all students, you're right, under the current context, get free lunch.
Okay.
So it is an apples to apples comparison to prior years when not all students got free lunch.
Okay. And then I was just wondering about, there's a big difference between math that comes out of 5th and 6th grade and math that's reported in 7th, 8th, and 9th. Wondering if there are thoughts about that big jump, that big dip between, they might be on grade level there, but then not so by the end of 9th grade even, not on grade level. So just wondering about, I don't know if there's more to be done. Obviously math overall, when I'm just reading through the report, is low. So I'm just wondering about that as a general concern, which I'm sure you've already thought of. And then just last question or comment, whatever, on the bottom of page 9, again referring to this behavioral chart. Why are there reasons that you can think of why a teacher wouldn't continue to make referrals for kids? Why is it so drastic from 0 to 1 referrals to 6+ referrals? Why is that such a huge jump? Why would dip in continued referrals? Is it because their behavior needs are met? Is it because there's other things in place that make it go from a 97% referral rate, 0 to 1 instances, to a 2% or 2 to 5? I mean, is it like it just seems like such a drastic drop in how many things are referred, and I'm confused.
So I can try to explain that one more time. So the 6th grade 2021 referral data, 75% of the 6th graders last year only had 0 or 1 office discipline referral, right? The goal is really 80%. So if you think about an MTSS, we would really want that to be 80%. A healthy behavioral system, you would love 0 to only 1 referral. These are major referrals too, so it's not just I threw my pencil on the floor. This is physical aggression or being somewhere where they shouldn't be, somewhat unsafe behaviors. So our goal is 80%. So what's exciting to celebrate there is that 97% of our 12th graders only had 0 to 1 office discipline referral last year. Please keep in mind, and I don't mean this to be snide in any way, they were only here half the time last year. So we had very small groups and they all weren't here every single day. So that, we feel that attributes to the ridiculously high and exciting percentage that's there. And then when you go to the 2 to 5 referrals, the goal there is to have it be no more than 15%, right? So technically, this is sort of where your targeted area of kids are. If the kid has 2 to 5, major referrals, office discipline referrals over the course of the year, you'd want to be giving them some level of support, right? So we don't want that to be more than 15% of our population. So we kind of hit that target there, obviously incredibly, ridiculously positive in 12th grade last year. And then for the 6+, you would want no more than 3 to 5% of your population having that much office discipline referral data. So that's pretty high, really, for 6th grade. Obviously beautiful in 12th grade last year. Does that help?
Yeah, I get the breakdown of it and, that you're in, it's just such a drastic drop from, 0 to 1 referrals to 2 to 5. And I just wonder about why it's so drastic. Like, what are the variables that, like, contribute to that being so drastic? It just seems like so dichotomous, but I understand the breakdown that you're offering. I'm just confused as to what the variables are that make that so.
So just to stay on that chart for a minute, is it accurate looking at 2021, 12th grade, 97% of the students had 0 or 1, 2% had 2 to 5, and 1% had 6 or more, adding up to 100%. So 100%, that's how you get to 100% of the students. That's the correct way to read that chart, right? Just wanted to be clear about that. Does that help, Aaron?
I get the math, you can do the math, you can understand the breakdown of where you want to be. Just didn't understand the variables. Why would it be that 0 to 1 referrals for a big office discipline referral in 2021 then drops to only 2%? That would mean that there's a very small percentage of kids that make up that group. There's a lot of variables there that I just don't understand. Don't have to go into it now, just food for thought.
Okay, I'd like to return to the charts on page 5. So it's great. I think there's much to celebrate here. But I also think there's some concerning things that, and I am particularly focused on equity. It's one of my themes. And if you're looking at the charts, not at the very bottom of page 5, but the 2 charts just above the bottom, if I'm reading this correctly, the math met or exceeded the standard 7th grade in 2019, 30% of the kids receiving or eligible for free and reduced price lunch met the standard. We don't have any 20 data, so you have to go 2 years ahead to 2021 data, which is the red line. So, no, I'm sorry, the green line, receiving eligible to receive free and reduced price lunch. In grade 9, that number drops to 6%. That's a huge drop. And I hope that's a red flag, and that there is concern about that, and work being done to. If I read this correctly, that's the same cohorts is going in 7th grade from 30% on meeting or exceeding the standards to 6% in grade 9. And then a similar thing is happening in reading English language, although it's not nearly as severe a drop. And the other thing about those 2 charts that's concerning is the difference between the students who are receiving or are eligible to receive free and reduced price lunch and those who are not. We're above that eligibility. The difference in lines there between the red and the orange are the are the kids with means, and the blue and the green are the kids without means, and that's a really big difference between kids with means and kids that don't have. And we know that's true, and we may be doing better than a lot of other schools, but that doesn't mean it's good. So that's concerning to me. The other thing is, just above that, in math, 7, 8, and 9, now did you put, is this all the 7th, 8th, and 9th graders in the entire district? This is all of middle school, is that right? Or
It is.
actually, it's 1 year of high school, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade?
Yes.
So
I mean,
that's
there are some cases where students' test may have been unscorable. So there are some cases where a student's test may have been unscorable because it wasn't finished.
Yeah.
So, but for the most part, yes, those are supposed to be all our 7th, 8th, and 9th graders.
Yeah, I'm aware that I administered in those tests, and watching students put their pencils down and not take the tests is concerning. But those numbers aren't good. Proficiency dropping from 35 to 32 to 28. I mean, just 35 isn't good, and then they dropped over the 3-year period. To me, that's alarming. So, yes, to reinforce, I think there is a lot of good things happening here. I also think there's a lot of work to be done. Who gets us next?
Thank you. I wanted to thank Michael again for doing the tour of the school, and by all means, I can definitely see where a multi-tiered system, when implemented, can be an incredibly effective way of doing things. One of the things I noted that you said that made me think more of the policy perspective, our interpretation is to meet these goals at a cost that's acceptable. And it made me think, as a board member, when you gave the description that you had the resources, but you only had those resources really in your sort of kind of availability of staffing probably for that one class, it made me think about, should we be thinking as a board, if you had a wish list of resources, not just for the most challenging grade, but if you had a wish list for resources for your other classes, what would that be, and what would that cost be? Because really, in the end, it's about what's ultimately acceptable to the community. And so we have to think about, well, then what is effective, and then what is the cost, and then decide, between those two competing pieces, what can we then provide? So just as a comment, it just made me that kind of be like, okay, so that's part of what we're supposed to do is this interpretation is, maybe we should be really thinking about providing more resources if it's really effective. And again, what would that cost be?
That's all right. That's all right. Okay. So I think we had some time to ask questions. My timekeeper has let me know we're a little beyond our time limit. Is there any other pressing questions that you want noted? What I've done is captured what your comments are, and I'll include them with the response sheets that I have collected, and then with the response form. All right, so everybody's all right moving ahead. I have a couple questions for you. You can give a thumbs up or for yes, or thumbs down for no. Based on the information provided, does the board find that the superintendent's interpretation is reasonable? Yes. Okay. Or no? So the yeses have it. Does the data demonstrate the accomplishment of this interpretation? Yes or no?
Well, I mean, I think Patrick said it didn't, right? And so we're. Does it support
This
the
is-
non-compliance report? Or does
This
it
is our
support-
annual,
This is
an annual thing.
I never know what to do here.
I'm agreeing with Patrick.
You're agreeing with Patrick that the data does not support.
Okay.
Wait, no, but it's not about that, it's about the interpretation. Did we follow what was in the interpretation?
Does the data demonstrate the accomplishment of this interpretation?
Right.
So if you're looking at the interpretation as it stands now, did the data demonstrate that, what we said it means?
So, yeah, so can I clarify just, so when I hear that, I appreciate Patrick putting this report very bravely, saying I report non-compliance based on the data. And so I'm agreeing with his interpretation of non-compliance, and so that's why I put my thumbs up.
I think an important addition to
I'm just
that
trying to-
is,
yeah.
so under policy governance, whenever a report of non-compliance is issued, it is expected that there's a plan to become compliant, which is embedded in the summary.
Right.
So,
Right, no,
so
right.
perhaps a thumbs up might suggest we acknowledge the data did not suggest that the ends were accomplished. However, we're satisfied that that's been recognized and there's a plan to move us to compliance. I feel like that's where we've gone in the past when we've had these conversations and that we've struggled with the same action.
Because Val had said all along when she was training us that a non-compliance does not mean, it's not a bad thing in all cases. It does mean there's further work to be done. And is that work, is there a plan to do that work? There should always be a plan to do that work, so.
Rephrase the question.
Well, I can't rephrase the question because based on the information provided, does the board find that the data demonstrates accomplishment of this interpretation? That's the way to question. I got
I think it demonstrates an understanding of this.
one,
Six.
seven. All right, and then. Oh, and Andrew's 8. All right, 9. Okay, so yes. All right. Okay, and so I've captured all your notes and that'll be included with the monitoring report. All right, so then what we need to do is now to vote. So all those in favor of accepting the A1N's monitoring report, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Andrew, did you vote? All right, okay, so the motion passes. All right, down to update financial report that was included in the packet. Are there any pressing questions? Okay, keep moving along. Next is the update on the facilities project.
I had intended to give you a written report for this to speed things along, and that didn't happen. But I'll be brief with an oral report. So just quickly, the two front entrance projects, one at Robinson, one at Bristol, they're moving along. Robinson is ahead of pace with Bristol. Should be wrapping up in the coming days to maybe a week or so. And I'll look to Floyd to clarify anything here. Bristol's moving a little more slowly. I think they're going to get some support from the teams that are working at Robinson to move that along more rapidly. So still moving forward, not quite at the pace for either project that we would have hoped. Mostly where I want to focus our time today is just to kind of bring you up to speed on some other bigger projects, really focusing primarily at Mount Abe. We've been talking some about the lobby and the bathroom renovations at Mount Abe. So that is in the very early stages of getting started. The scope of that work is sufficient enough in cost that it requires pre-qualification, so the process is a bit more involved. So we actually have a meeting tomorrow morning with architects and others to kind of move that forward some. Floyd's done a lot of work looking at that project and others we'll talk about and kind of mapping out the financial path forward to move those projects along based on the cost estimates that we have now. But the list of projects, so the lobby and first floor bathrooms is one, and kind of tag teaming with that, we're optimistic that the second floor bathrooms can also be addressed at Mount Abe. If you've been in any of those bathrooms, you know how desperately they are needing to be renovated. Another project we've talked about is the roof at Mount Abe. We did get the results back from the assessment that was being done. It has about 3 years of life left in it. So we have in the plan to replace that roof before its life expectancy runs out. We've also talked about the electrical upgrade at Mount A. And for us, especially looking at a new roof going on, we're interested in exploring solar in combination with the electrical upgrade and thinking about what opportunities might present there. And in mapping those out, the thinking currently is for the lobby and bathroom renovation to happen over this coming summer, probably starting in the spring, so that it can finish over the summer and we can feel confident that that's done before the start of next school year. That's really important. The following summer, we'd be looking at the roof project. And then the summer after that, depends, I guess is the answer. One of the things that's kind of hanging out there that has a cost factor is what's the future plan for our central office location? What decisions are made around that will impact what happens in that third summer, because our lease will be up by then and we'll have to go somewhere, and it will likely cost something to go somewhere. So once we know more about that as this process unfolds, it will either be whatever work needs to happen to relocate central office in that third or fourth summer here, or that's the time when we would tackle that electric solar need at Mount A. And remembering that as a unified district, if we do go the solar route and the solar produces more energy than Mount A needs, those credits can be a benefit to one of the other schools in the district. So in any event, it's mapped out. We're really looking carefully at how we achieve those projects. There's a pretty clear path forward for it to happen. It's going to be a combination of budget money and use of the capital reserve funds that we've been putting into that account that we established a couple of years ago. So we can talk more about that in the future, but just wanted to give you a heads up. We're moving forward with some of those projects we've been talking about for a little while now.
We got questions.
I'll start here and then if you'll pass it down.
My understanding is there's some controversy over with regard to the lobby, what is required by OSHA and what is not required by OSHA. How is that being resolved?
I'm not aware of a controversy surrounding the lobby project with VOSHA or OSHA. Boyd, is anything ringing a bell for you?
No, I was hoping Dave might clarify that controversy that he's speaking of. I'll send you a note later. I just heard from someone who was at the meeting that what was reported as required to meet OSHA standards was in fact not required, according to a person who understands OSHA standards. What meeting are you describing? I wasn't there. Pardon me? I was not at the meeting. Someone just. I'm just trying to. We have the kickoff meeting tomorrow morning, so I'm trying to work backwards because what you're saying is certainly got my attention. Yeah. Well, I would suggest you inquire at the meeting tomorrow.
I have two questions or comments. One is about the front entrances, especially at Bristol. And I'm wondering if you can encourage some communication with families, because it's been a long, slow, sort of painful thing to witness, and just some clarity for folks so they know what the status is, I think would be helpful. And then regarding Mount Abe, as I hear about more renovations happening, I just think a lot about some of the core work that seemed unable to be accomplished. Like, I understood there's a lot of chipping away at things that didn't require a major renovation. And I understand that a lot of these things are part of that work. But do everything you can to really bring the building up to speed, short of a major $30 million renovation. But I would just ask that you really consider how an upgrade to the elevator might be considered as part of this. It's long overdue, and I hope it's considered along with these other priorities.
I recognize I'm totally in the weeds and probably shouldn't elaborate on this a whole lot, but regarding the electrical project, I would be a lot more comfortable if there were some analyticals being done on up to that project being done to understand the condition of that system.
I think there were a few more that way.
Yeah, just to that point, that absolutely is work that needs to happen. There's a lot of analysis that needs to be done leading up to that project to really think about what makes sense and what doesn't make sense, for sure.
I think I just want to recognize the incredible push-pull that there is around facilities versus staffing needs. And I just appreciate you navigating that, and I don't know.
All right. Okay. Keep moving along. Next is a discussion item for you new members. As we enter into budget season, we typically have a discussion where Patrick and his team share some anticipated budget drivers they think that we're headed for this year and some assumptions they're taking to start building the budget. And we just kind of get everybody on the same floor so we all know what's being used and what starts this building process.
Yeah, so I'll share my screen and walk through a presentation to get the conversation started. And it's important to note, this is a practice we started a few years ago, and trying to help the board set a budget target. So the way the process works is the board sets a target for me to hit in terms of what level of spending the board's comfortable bringing forward to the community. Historically, that target has been keep it under the spending threshold. We don't have a spending threshold anymore, so we need to think differently about a target, and I'll share some thinking about a possible target as we walk through. What we started a few years ago was recognizing it's pretty tricky in the absence of any information or context to just say to the board, what's your target? So our practice has become essentially using a lot of assumptions because we're very early in the process, but basically giving you the best information we have now and some assumptions we have about going forward, give you an idea of if we make no or little change, where might we be, and how do you feel about that, and how do you want to walk that forward or back from that projection. So what I'm going to present, again, very preliminary, but it's an attempt to give you some context so that you have information upon which to give some direction about a target. Targets can move, right? You're going to get information tonight that's going to prompt you hopefully to take action to give us a target so we have our marching orders. And we're going to learn a whole lot more over the next month when we come back to you in November. That may influence your thinking about the target. Maybe you want to keep the target the same, maybe not. Just know that you're not locked into the target tonight. As you get more information, that can be adjusted. Any questions about process? That makes sense? All right, so the first thing we want to do is just sort of be really clear about the assumptions that we're making as we look at this budget. So this budget, as we've done in the past, assumes we continue to not fill positions that we chose not to fill this year. Each year we've had these conversations. We look really critically when someone chooses to leave, whether or not we replace that position. Because we know, basically every year, we have to reduce positions to get a budget that we think will pass muster with the voters. So every time someone leaves, we look to take advantage of that because everyone we choose not to replace is potentially one less position that we have to reduce going forward where someone loses a job that they wanted to keep. So not filling is always preferable to reducing positions when people wish to stay. This does assume a reduction of 1.0 classroom teacher and 0.1 reduction in admin at Lincoln. And that's reflective of the enrollment decline. We'll talk more about enrollment projections on a couple of slides, so you'll see that, but that's where to have.
Sorry to interrupt, but the first bullet, the PS and the SS, what?
Oh, sorry. So the total that we chose not to fill this year is 5.63 full-time equivalencies, right? So FTEs. And the breakdown is 3.6 professional staff and 2.03 support staff. Some of those are in the coaching and coordinating realm as folks left and we chose not to fill. So library assistant position, so there's a combination of things that are in there to make that up. Some other assumptions, 10% increase in healthcare premiums. I don't know how optimistic we are about that. That's lower than they've been in recent years, but we'll see. This does also assume a 34.9 drop in equalized pupil. That's big, right? Each of those equalized pupils you can effectively multiply by $19,000, and that's the financial impact of that drop in equalized pupil. Quite significant. So again, if spending stays flat and we lose equalized pupil, our cost per pupil goes up, and that means taxes go up. That's essentially how it works. This is a quite safe assumption. It is an audited fund balance from FY21 of 1,420,000, sorry.
Almost done. We're working on finalizing the draft, but that number is agreed upon.
Right. So that is likely what you will see in the audit for a fund balance. What you'll see here does not have a spending threshold. We talked about that. That's gone. And it does assume that revenue is reduced by $266,000. We'll talk about that when we talk about what we're recommending with a fund balance. So in terms of the fund balance, last year we used $366,000 to offset taxes. That's the amount we used from the fund balance that we had available. The recommendation currently is that we use $100,000 to offset taxes. And that difference of $100,000 to $366,000 is what you see in the reduction in revenue. And we're recommending that we replace the remaining, give or take 1.3 million, into a combination of the capital reserve fund and the education reserve fund. Still working on exactly what dollar amounts we would recommend, but those are the two places we would put those. Obviously, we talked about some capital work that we're looking to do. And we're recognizing after next year, ESSER dollars dry up, and we're interested in thinking about how can we utilize capital fund or fund balance dollars in the ed reserve to potentially provide a bridge for us from the end of ESSER dollars to wherever we land in terms of consolidation, reconfiguration, merger, et cetera. Where we experience some efficiency. We're expecting there's going to be a window between next year and whatever the more efficient place we land is. Perhaps money in that ed reserve can help us bridge that. And just in general, the practice of applying as little as we think we can get away with fund balance to offset taxes puts us in better position for the next budget, because as we're experiencing here, any reduction in the amount of fund balance that we apply to offset taxes equates to a drop in revenue. Drop in revenue means we either have to increase taxes to cover spending or reduce spending to keep taxes stable. So it's best practice to use as little of a fund balance to offset taxes as possible, and sometimes it's a necessary thing. Enrollment and class sizes become important as we start thinking about this. I mean, the enrollment is a driving factor to decrease in equalized pupils. And you can kind of see here school by school over time, and then total for MAUSD at the bottom. That reflects the change in our enrollment in our schools. So when you look at MAUSD in total over this time, you can see about 135 students. We've lost 135 students at this level. What's important to remember is typically we are graduating larger classes than the incoming kindergarten, And we know that high school students are weighted more heavily than elementary students, so the effect on the equalized pupil count is actually greater than the loss of enrolled students. And that's part of why we see that such a significant change over time here.
Remind me which year we're in right now.
So we're in FY22, so this column here.
So right now, there are 78 kids at Beaman. Equalized pupils or?
No, this is enrolled. This is, if you walked in Beaman and every kid was present, this is how many little heads you'd see.
Okay.
Not this week.
Right. That's right, if everyone was present. So this is now starting to look at class size. And so it's sort of interesting, our class size guidelines, which are here, you can see, look at, it's a little different for grade 3 than it is grade 4. And most of our schools have classrooms that are combined 3rd and 4th grade. We heard about some here today at Moncton. So for the purposes of showing you class size, I've grouped classes by K2, because we don't have any 2-3 classrooms. So we can look with some reliability at K2 class size and 3 through 6 class size. And then I always think it's helpful to look at just overall in that school, what's the average class size? I think those 3 indicators are helpful in thinking about class size. So what's helpful here is I tried to keep the colors the same. So if you look across Beaman, the 2 darker red boxes are comparing last year to this year for K2, and then the slightly lighter red comparing last year and this year to 3-6, and then comparing last year and this year overall. What I want to acknowledge here is that the Lincoln projected is the class size projection which reflects that reduction of 1 classroom. So that's after backing that 1 out to reflect the enrollment. And I didn't point this out, but you can see the enrollment drop at Lincoln, which is precipitating their response in change in staffing at Lincoln. So the projection next year for Lincoln is 68 students. Part of the other factor is, looking at sort of equity across schools, right? I think that's something that I think very carefully about. We have an equalized tax rate across all 5 towns. So part of the philosophy in my mind is taxpayers in one town are probably not interested in paying the same tax rate as everybody else, where other schools have much lower class sizes, right? So trying to look at it from an equity to the taxpayer perspective, as well as the kind of environment and supports that we're providing students. And that to me is part of the impetus for, even at times when we may not need to make reductions to get a budget where it needs to be, there may be other reasons to make changes along those lines. And that's some of what's at play here. So again, looking at class sizes, we move a bit closer to having consistent class sizes next year with some of the changes we're looking at, and we'll have to continue to look each year. Sometimes it gets tricky in terms of the grade configuration, and we've talked about that some, especially in some of the smallest schools. Like it's not really desirable to have, say, 3 grades in a classroom. And as schools get smaller and smaller, that it has potential to become a reality. So it does sometimes prompt creative grade configurations. So here's where it really starts to kind of get down to it. So again, this is using the $100,000 fund balance that we talked about. Our projection right now, with all the assumptions that we've talked about, shows that the increase in spending over spending, year-over-year spending, which again, used to be how we build budgets, right? We used to focus on how much did your total spending increase from last year. Pretty much if you were 3% or under, that was a green light and everybody was going to be happy with that. Now it's really based on equalized pupil cost, so it's a game changer. This is the 2nd year in a row we've been around a 1% increase in year-over-year spending. And because we're losing equalized pupils, in particular this year, and if you remember we had a whole harmless last year, This year, the whole promise is gone, and we're playing a little bit of catch up. That's why you see the 35 or so equalized pupil drop. We're losing actually the equalized pupils we would have lost last year, plus equalized pupils we expect to lose this year, all catching up with us here. And so even though the year-over-year spending is a 1% increase, which is Herculean in many ways, like back in the day, 1%, we'd be dancing in the street about a 1% increase, given all the costs that we talked about, 10% for health insurance, et cetera, et cetera. Unfortunately, because we're losing almost 35 equalized people, it still reflects a 4.76% increase in the cost for equalized people. Important to remember what goes on the ballot, right? On the ballot, the voters look at your total spending and the percent increase of total spending, your total cost per equalized pupil, and the percent increase in cost per equalized pupil. I don't think I don't think most people comprehend what $32 million is as a school budget, and they perhaps don't comprehend what $19,500 per equalized pupil is. I think people do comprehend what percent increase was your spending from last year, and I think they do comprehend what percent increase did your cost per pupil go up. So for me, as I'm thinking about a target for the board to set for us, a cost per equalized pupil or a percent increase in the cost per equalized pupil may be a good way to go in terms of setting a target for us. What percent increase? Because I don't think 1% increase in the spending is going to be a scary number on the ballot. I don't know what I think about 4.76. I know when it was 8.1%, our budget passed by 13 votes. So that's pushing the limit, it seems. At 4.6, a couple of years ago, it passed by a much larger margin. I don't recall what it was, but a much larger margin. So that may be some barometer for what the reaction to 4.76% equalized pupil might be. When we look at what this means for the tax rates, you can see what that change is. Important to note that this is the first year we have no Act 46 tax benefit. If you recall, so we were one of the a later adopters, so we didn't get the 10-cent benefit year. We started at 8 cents, then 6, then 4, then 2. This is our first year where there's no benefit. So what that means is, and it has meant this every year before, right? It's great to get an 8% or 8-cent tax benefit, but when the next year is a 6-cent tax benefit, you've effectively felt the loss of 2 cents. So we're feeling that here as well, going from 2 to 0. You can see what that does to the tax rates, and really, in terms of how it hits the wallet, on change per 100,000 of assessed value. So again, this is for about the 1/3 of folks that pay based on the value of their home. You can see it ranges from $100 to just shy of $120 per 100,000 of assessed value at that level. 2/3 pay based on income, and the income calculation is much more complex than this, but just using the most recent median income to see what impact that would have on this demographic, you can see it's slightly smaller at $81. So a lot of information very quickly in support of helping you issue a budget target for us.
So the biggest driver factor then is having to, the loss of students from last year plus this year. That's the biggest driver in this budget. 35-ish.
I would, yes, that's the biggest, and I would add that about 50% of the increase in spending is that 10% increase in healthcare costs.
50% of increase in spending
Right.
is.
So our spending went up 350-ish thousand, whatever that was. 160 something thousand of that, Floyd might have it more handily, is healthcare. Specifically.
So students and healthcare.
Yeah. And really that's the challenge for us, right? Is we have increasing expenses that are outside of our control. Healthcare is a big example. And we're losing students. And that combination of increasing costs and decreasing students to divide those costs by is the double whammy that we've been feeling each year for a while.
Patrick or Floyd, did you guys sort of, where's your thumb on the pulse of the people waiting? Because that might come into law. I don't know if that would influence FY23, but definitely FY24.
I don't have any reason to believe it'll hit 23. I think that would be far more rapid than anything that would roll out. We did the merger study committee recently had Ruth Hardy, who's a senator for Addison County, and she's the co-chair of the task force that's looking at the pupil waiting study. And from my read on this, Floyd and I have talked, I think we heard it the same way. Floyd was there, others can chime in. I think there were three of you here tonight that were there. She made it pretty clear, Addison County will lose equalized pupils as a result of implementation of the waiting study. How many is unknown. There are a lot of different models they're working through. Over what period of time is unknown because they're looking at how to phase it in. It is definitely recognized that Addison County is already struggling with what we're looking at with declining enrollment and the effects it has on our equalized pupil count, et cetera. So that's known. Floyd's going to be testifying. Others have testified. We've had opportunities to meet with Ruth and to share that perspective. Like, it's definitely known. And that will probably influence the phasing in part, but it's not going to, I don't think it's going to be anything that stops this train from moving forward.
Can I just, before, sorry, one other piece of information to your question is they expect to release Thursday afternoon, evening, the modeling. And then we're testifying Friday. So if you have an idea what my homework is Thursday night, there it is. But it will allow us to be able to see what they're thinking in some of the different ways they want to craft it. But to Patrick's point, there was no question that Addison County is going to be negatively impacted, and there was no indication that there was anything that was going to try to make that softer.
I would just add, it's important for context too. Sorry, Sarah. Even though I know it's going to create additional hardship for MAUSD, I support the work that the committee is doing. Like looking at the weights is something that needs to happen because it's best for Vermont, all students in Vermont. Part of what's going to impact Addison County in particular is, without question, the biggest change that's being looked at is around poverty. The poverty weight right now, I think, is 0.2, and they're looking at possibly weighting that at 2.9. Like 11, 12, like it's a huge, huge change. And Addison County generally, though we have some poverty, we're not close to high poverty compared to other areas of the state. Another big change is looking at sort of this concept of rurality and how rural a district might be and the impact that has on its ability to provide. And though Addison County is rural, we are not nearly as rural as when you get up into some of the corners of the Northeast Kingdom. So those are at least some of the contributing factors as to why Addison County is going to feel what we're going to feel.
My other question is, what tax yield do you guys estimate?
We left it flat with what we're at currently.
One thing I was thinking about is the way people vote is often, dictate a lot around the narrative at the time, and I think that there's, we have a big fund balance right now, and we have ESSER funds, and we have folks who are really asking for more support in our schools. And I think we have to really figure out how to ensure that we can, further the work that you are charged with doing around, student support in this sort of Nate Levinson model, but also recognizing that, there are, from a lot of folks' perspective, there's unmet needs in staffing. And so I hope that there's a way to include some of that perspective in the conversations around staffing and in the way those funds might be allocated, that can continue to bring us toward that, systems goal, but also recognize the moment we're in, and also that, ideally, if we're able to create a different facilities plan moving forward in the next few years, we might not feel such intensive pressures and be more sustainable financially. So, I'm not sure how great it would be to put such a huge chunk of money in reserves at this moment. And I think it could really impact folks' interest in supporting our budget if we don't listen to some of that narrative that's out there.
Sarah was waiting.
Yes. Sorry, totally. You know, okay.
So I'm curious if by putting money in the education reserve, that really gives us the flexibility to handle the immediate need. So that's the vehicle, I think, at least when I was voting for the education reserve previously, it was to be able to take advantage of a situation like this, where we don't have to go back to the taxpayers for more money and increase taxes to solve the problem. We don't have a whole lot of money in it right now. I don't think it's just 250, isn't it?
250, 300, yeah, somewhere in there.
Yep. This one might be an opportunity to take some of that money and say, okay, we know, maybe we can spend some extra money, on short-term recovery, which I think everybody would agree what's been going on recently probably falls under that category. But the ability to take some money that we've already received from the voters and put it in a place where we, as the board, have the discretion to solve some of these immediate problems, I think is a great option.
That's, when I was talking about that bridge before, from post-ESSER to that more efficient place we're working toward, that's exactly it. And my mind is around mostly staffing. Like, we have hired staff with ESSER dollars, that when those ESSER dollars go away, we have to figure out, do we continue supporting those positions or not? And if so, how? So that's some of the thinking that is behind wanting to put a pretty substantial portion of that fund balance into the ed reserve, because it does give the board that flexibility to get us from where we are now to where we're going in a way that doesn't feel like a cliff. Like, that's the concern, right? This potential ESSER cliff after next year, millions of dollars, many hundreds of thousands that are currently devoted to staffing go away. We're not anticipating an increase in equalized pupil. We're not anticipating a decrease in other fixed costs like healthcare, et cetera. So the challenge we're looking at in this budget is projected to continue. And we would layer on top of that millions of dollars of ESSER funds going away and several positions that are funded with them gone if we don't have some other mechanism for covering those costs. So that's the bridge.
I would add that to your point earlier about the impact when you have to then pull that, when you don't have that revenue in the subsequent year, is now substantially more painful in that year than putting some money away this year in the tax impact.
And it's not necessarily the same because we're putting it away this year, that we might just spend it next year. It can be a very short-term turnaround for where that money goes.
Yep.
The other thing I find interesting that I hadn't really thought about was everybody's talking about the spending threshold having been removed. We don't know for how long, but at least it's been removed for this next budget season. But it doesn't relieve the tax pressure. It doesn't relieve the, it's not a sort of a dollar for dollar penalty anymore, but it's still a dollar penalty, for losing and voting for a high budget.
I might have missed this, but what was the anticipated spending threshold?
We did include a spending threshold.
Like they usually goes up about sometimes 0.2%.
So anywhere from so last year was 0.18 that it went up from the year before. Prior to that, looking at 3 or 5 years, it's in the low 2% to maybe 2.5% annual.
I can speak to that a little bit. It's driven, statute drives it out of NEAP, the New England Economic Product, I don't have it right, but it's NEAP, and the NEAP numbers for September are 4.6% up. But think of what that number is. That's inflation. And that's the number that drives the threshold. So last year it was 0.18 is what the threshold moved. Taking that number that shows for the end of September at 4.6, that would move the threshold substantially. At a 2.5% increase, it was moving the threshold to 19,259.
So we would still be over that 4.6 with that.
Well, that's if it's 2.5, we would have, but if it's 4.6, if it's really reflective of that number, then we, from a threshold standpoint, we'd be toes on the line probably.
So my follow-up question is, should they bring it back the following year? Are we now 10% over, or are we where do they maybe go, oh, we would have been at 4.6, and that's what a lot of people projected, so we're gonna use around 4.6, so that people aren't worried about the following year. Not that we're not worried about the immediate needs, but
Sarah, that's
every time we do this, we have to be ready for how much worse we're setting ourselves up for.
That's the question that gives us nightmares. I mean, truly, because you don't know what's going to happen. The one thing I think we all agree on is the state is going to, in some way, encourage districts to control spending.
I mean, in some ways they do just by saying you have to put it on your ballot with a percentage.
I agree.
But I think your point is well taken. Decisions we make this year impact the work for the following. Absolutely.
So I might be an outlier here, but I think $20,000 per pupil to educate our kids, our most valuable resource in this state, is reasonable. And even despite the fact that I'm a retired person and my wife and I are living on a fixed income, we'd be happy to pay that. It's a little bit of a risk, I'm speaking for my wife, but I think she values the education of our children as much as I do. I do recognize, however, there's an awful lot of anger out there about how much people are paying in taxes, and it's the one tax bill that people can control. They can't control what the federal government spends on warfare or what the state spends on, welfare. But we can vote in our community what we spend on schools, and there's a lot of anger. So I understand the need to recognize that and keep the percentage per pupil costs reasonable. I don't know, 4.76 sounds reasonable to me.
I think it's also important to remember that last year, 3 of our 5 towns saw a reduction in their taxes. you know, I don't know if it was Krista was talking about the narrative, you know, the education taxes. I'm not going to speak to the other side, but the narrative that 4.76 might not be 4.76 compared to fiscal year 21.
One other piece that I want to add for the new people who are just doing this the first time is that this is all going to change. Next month, there's going to be a different number somewhere that's going to change, and we'll have to think about how we're looking at it again, kind of thing. So if you feel like you're barely getting what's going to happen, hang on, because it's going to change, and it's going to keep changing until probably the last minute is what we have experienced in the past.
It changed after you.
Right, even after we vote, it changes.
Change
Or
the
after
next
we
day.
warn the morning, it changes.
My thoughts are a little less in the weeds, but I think to what Sandy said earlier in referencing, kind of saying the principal here, I bumped in. Mike, and obviously echoing what Krista said earlier in regards to happenings in our district this year, and I struggle looking at the fact that we have $1.4 million sitting on the table, and we know that we aren't meeting all of our students' needs, and especially in the thick of time, what we all might call a time of crisis. And so I would love to see a process in which, I guess, maybe it's building leaders build their budget from the classroom sort of upwards. I think I heard that in the public comment tonight. And in the sense of, not because I want to just keep throwing money at it, but I want to throw effective resources at trying to help our students. And I'd just be really curious at what that number might come in when teachers in their classrooms, principals in their schools, us as a district feel like we have either the boots on the ground or the monetary resources to support all our needs so that they can reach their full potential, whatever that is. I mean, it's important to have the year-over-year historical lens, but I'm just really curious what that number might be, knowing that personnel is the largest driver of cost in our district. And for me, that would offer a better way to think about education investing, not education spending, is the way I think about it. And so I don't know if that's a process down the road that would have occurred, but that's just where I'm thinking. Without a threshold, there's no indication that's coming back or not coming back. I mean, there's just so many unknowns as we know, but what we do know right now is our kids are hurting, and we need to get them in a place where they feel safe, where our teachers feel safe, and we help support our students get back on track as they move throughout their educational journey. Because even though COVID might end next year, their educational experience in a COVID world hasn't, and it won't. So if we need to spend more, let's do it, or if we need to spend our money differently, let's do it.
What positions are supported by the ESSER funds currently?
I don't have it in front of me. Off the top of my head, we have an additional school social worker. We have right now 2 behavior assistants. We increased guidance by 0.4. We have a data manager. Help me out, Katrina and Susan.
2 custodials.
Custodial.
Those are actual standalone positions, but a lot of the funds supported teachers' collaborative curriculum work over the summer in preparation for learning loss. We have 2 home-to-school liaisons working in our elementary schools to help support kindergarten into 1st grade transition.
Also, we mentioned additional staffing as part of the plan in response to the sort of emergent needs at Bristol. Those would be included in there as well going forward.
Some of the funds also help support staffing for the summer program, and there's also funds available for after-school tutoring that we're just getting going in some of the schools.
Okay, I was just wondering because, you know, in the face of declining enrollment, I'm just wondering if there's a thought about, you know, at what point are we gonna look at the current structure of, you know, our curriculum model, or like, you know, there's a lot of talk about the coaches and the coordinators and their resource, but at what point do we say, like, we can't afford 4 filet mignons, right? We can't afford the 4 coordinators, but we could afford, you know, 4 Salisbury steaks in the school doing stuff, you know what I mean? So balancing out, kind of echoing what Krista and Rob are saying, like, you know, I don't think it's a question of like, how much more money do we need as opposed to how do we do more creatively? So I'm putting that out there as a wondering about, you know, if it's like that, can be broken down like that, or if it cannot.
Just to add that the 3.6 positions that we didn't fill were all instructional coaches, the professional staff, just to be clear.
Yeah, so I just keep wondering about that, about, you know, what that means for students overall, because we can, you know, we continue to have admin and we need a certain level of admin, but at the same time, like Rob and Krista have said, and I'm echoing that, you know, we need people in school, and unfortunately, I don't think there's any like comparative measures that come from, let's say, 2012 to 2017 that would say, you know, the way we did school before MTSS was this way, and we can effectively compare that to how school is now, right? Because the learning structure has changed, the measures have changed on how we, you know, get our data. So it's hard to compare, right, what happened before versus what happened now. And that's part of the struggle I have in understanding, I don't want to say the value because that's a really harsh word, but what the coaching model has added versus what it might be taking away from having a person sitting next to a student every day.
And I do also understand, I believe there's a degree of saving in that. I understand that. I thought they were, so coaching does also replace a different expense, correct? Am I correct on that? Could somebody explain that more?
We chose to have embedded professional development using in-house experts over, everybody will hear me and want to, over reliance on consultants, which had been happening quite a bit prior to the decision when we merged to invest more in folks that we could have right here in our district.
I know there are probably more questions, and we will, over the next couple of months, keep getting through those questions kind of thing. But we have an action item, and I'm looking at the agenda, and I can't really pull anything off our plate. We've got to deal with all this stuff tonight, so we've got to keep moving. The next item is an action item to set a budget target. Does anybody already have a motion in mind? Oh. Andrew.
Yeah, so I would make a motion to set the budget target at 5%.
For equalized pupil?
Per equalized pupil.
All right, Andrew made that motion. Is there a second?
Krista.
Any discussion? All right.
We can change it.
Yeah, we can change at our next meeting. If we look at the numbers and they're not what we thought we were gonna see, we can make a change as we go along. We'll come to a point where you can't make any more changes, but we will know that's coming when we look at the timeline in a few minutes. Okay, so all those in favor of Andrew's budget target motion at 5% at 5% increase on equalized pupil spending, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, thank you. Okay, next item is action on the career change incentive. Again, for people who don't know, our collective bargaining agreement has a term or an item in it that allows us to make a decision or a determination about whether to offer a career change incentive. In the past, we've used it to, if we expect we're gonna have reduction in staff, we've used it as a way to incentivize people who might meet the criteria and be thinking about it to go ahead and, say, I'll take that, and rather than having to cut a position, we just go through attrition to do that. But we have a timeline of when we have to decide if we're going to offer it. And the window,
November 1.
by November 1, we have to just, decide if we're gonna offer it. Some years we don't offer it, some years we do. So it really is on our decision. I don't know if you wanna.
I can set a little context. We typically utilize this as a tool in years when we anticipate needing to make multiple reductions. So this can be a tool to help create attrition so that we don't have to reduce people in terms of people losing their jobs. Given the budget we just looked at tonight with very minimal staffing reductions, I'm pretty confident that we can achieve those reductions through natural attrition that happens every year. So my recommendation would be that we do not offer the career change incentive this year as a result.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and Steve. All right, any further discussion? All those in favor of not offering the career change incentive, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any abstentions? All right. Next is a discussion item around the budget timeline.
Yeah, I can just sort of start the conversation there. Really, this is around, so the budget timeline, big picture, the January business meeting for the board is when you have to adopt a budget. Obviously, we did what we did tonight, gave you some preliminary information, you set a target. November, you'll see an updated version with some of the more accurate information that flows through. We'll talk about where we are relative to the target you set. If we had to make some big changes to stay at the target, we'll talk about what those are and the impacts. And we'll kind of walk through that process right up until January when we have basically the best information we're going to get. And the board will have to say, yes, they adopt the budget and approve the warnings and all those things, or no. Along the way, obviously, community members can attend these meetings and they can watch them on the recordings, et cetera. So we have some tools that we're utilizing now that we haven't necessarily always in the past. And in different years over time, the board has taken different actions to engage the community in perhaps more in-depth ways. So really this discussion, I think, is around in what ways does this board want to engage the community around this budget, and how do we build that process into the work that's happening right now. Could be something that goes to the community engagement committee for ideas and kickback. It could be something this board decides. It's really around in what ways and when does this board want to engage the community.
One of our choices, I'm assuming, is that we do it the way we did last year. Well, if there's anything anybody had a problem with last year, I think one of the more successful meetings was our budget committee forum, right? That's something we've been doing the last couple of budget sessions. We don't need to take an action on it.
No, it's just
discussion at this
just
point.
discussion, awareness.
I was just gonna add that on our agenda for the community engagement committee meeting next Tuesday is what are our engagement priorities? So that is something we can add into that conversation. But someone with a better memory than me, Kristen, maybe, when did we do our budget meeting?
I can look it up, I'm trying to think of,
We did it in December, mid-December, I think.
Because we can bring that to the committee as context to say this is how we've done in the past.
I can bring that to the meeting next week, I just have to look it up.
And I think part of the conversation is, if the intent is to engage the community to gather input to influence budget decisions, that's one process. If the intent is to report out and help the community understand the budget the board's adopted, that's a different process. And they don't have to be mutually exclusive, it could be a both and. But just talking that through may be helpful to give some guidance to the community engagement.
I like how you just put that, because I think we have done well with our informational sharing. If we're trying to get information, just sitting with Virgins very clearly is a different tool. Knowing what went out to my faculty at a different school system, that was just informing, here's what we're using for gathering community input, and here's the meeting that's occurring, et cetera, that's on Zoom, or one of those. I think, and for that purpose, specifically, not for sharing. So I think if we were hoping to do a better job with that, it might be worth it for the community engagement committee, to explore maybe what a couple other districts use for tools. And I'm happy to suggest what they are, but I don't want to say them incorrectly right now. That would be great.
Are people comfortable with that next step, as getting more examples from Sarah, and then we talk about communication committee and make a recommendation to the full board?
I think we should do something.
So we had that meeting 1/21/21.
Okay, so that was really
We only had one last year instead of two, and that was recommended by Patrick because of numbers changing and the situation last year, so I don't know if this year we do want to do one in December.
So if that was in January, that was purely information sharing, not input gathering.
In anticipation of the next item, could you pass one out to everybody, this one, I sort of started separating, that'd be great, so.
The next item is a discussion item, it's consideration of a new policy or amendment of an existing policy, the formation of school advisory council. Steve's gonna walk us through that. We're not expecting a decision tonight, this is just a way, let's have Steve walk us through this, and then plan to have another discussion where we can get a little deeper into it once we understand Steve's presentation.
Do we have this up on our side?
Let's see if I can.
Anybody else want to?
You should get us to Nancy, because she helped with this.
So, I'm trying to lay some intentional history here. When we were talking at one of the latest meetings about the need for a feedback loop, that, advisory councils might be a tool to help us, be more informed about what's happening in the trenches. There was some work done back in 2018 on this topic when we first became a district board, the very first summer board retreat. We had a session where Patrick brought in the VSBA, and we talked about the different challenges and logistical issues and some of the just policy issues that might arise from trying to form advisory councils. And so I kept a list of what those issues were, and Caleb Elder also did, and Caleb came up with an initial sort of cloud thought, or a thought exercise on this that he passed around. I took that initial cloud and I kind of formalized it into a diagram and some parameters. And the whole goal for doing this wasn't to try to staple something and carve it in stone up on a wall and have us all bow to it, but to basically put things down in a format where people could review them as potential solutions to some of the logistical issues and react to them. Have a reaction, say, oh, you really want, oh yeah, we do have to address that issue, but do we want to do it like that, or do we want to do it like something else? Example would be, you know, do we want to pay secretary to basically keep minutes for all of these groups? You know, that brings up alarm bells in a lot of folks' minds, but it also makes people think, is it something where we're really going to be able to find a volunteer for each of these groups to do that sort of work? And how do we incentivize people to do that? So it's just a thought exercise. This is really just a thought exercise. And it tries to address many of the issues that were brought up by the VSBA and in our summer retreat. And after formulating it, I did pass it by Caleb again and by Nancy Cornell, who's here tonight, and you have a little narrative of a conversation between Nancy and myself about some of the possibilities and some of the options that could be incorporated into this. But for starters, essentially what the groups would be doing would be providing kind of an outlet for folks at a local level, at the local school level, to talk about local school issues. And I refer to that kind of as the means loop, because those folks are dealing with, you know, the nuts and bolts of the everyday school life and what's going on at that particular school that's particular to that school environment. And it would be made up of folks who had an invested interest in that. And outside groups like mentors and PTOs and things like that who really are focused on their local schools would have a place to plug in. Those groups would be able to have a meeting that here is proposed that the principal would run it, similar to the way the principals used to attend the board meetings. And they would sort of facilitate and they would act as the gatekeeper for what came out of those. And what's really important here is the end product. What do we get out of these meetings in terms of feedback to the board and also for the board to be able to react and make people feel like they've been heard, that those issues have been addressed if folks feel that there's a need for that to happen. So there's some examples of different types of conversations that could happen in these groups. In this diagram, there's two different types of groups. One, because one of the issues that was brought up in that summer retreat discussion was that if the local group wanted to tackle something that really was a district problem, was there an opportunity for it to be brought to a district level discussion? And it's not, and also that it would give a chance to cross-pollinate between boards if there was a place where district-wide discussions could also happen. So in addition to there being a local group for each school, and that includes non-aid, by the way, not just the elementary schools, there would be a district group, and this district group could be just maybe it could be a rejiggering of the community engagement committee. It could be a completely separate group. It could be, you know, and how these groups are formed right now is sort of laid out in here as a solution. You elect them in March, and here's the groups that elect who and who represents. But these again are all just it's taking a position for folks to react, for folks to think about for a moment and go, oh yeah, we do actually have to elect people. How are we going to do that? So it's not that these positions are this diagram is fixed or these spots are fixed. It's just, it tries to propose a solution to each of the logistical issues for everybody to think about. So just in terms of trying to follow the feedback loop here for a moment, the local advisory council would take, for instance, maybe this example agenda, they would be discussing it, they would come up with an agenda and a list of action items they're working on. They may be able to work out some of these issues right there in that meeting with themselves. You know, developing mentoring opportunities, coordinating with outside volunteers, bringing in some outside, you know, musical groups or whatever they want to do, they can solve those issues themselves. But if it crops up as something that really needs to be brought to the superintendent's and staff's attention beyond this group, then that's targeted. That list and that agenda are public in a way that the board can monitor, the superintendent can monitor, anybody can monitor. So we're seeing what the conversation is real time. We're seeing what the issues are that rise to the top that need to go somewhere else. We can understand when they've been addressed. So if it's something Patrick does need to address, he can address it. The principal can then talk about it at the next advisory council meeting. And you can kind of see what's happened to that particular issue. The principal also, you'll see it says filter here or reassign. And what that means is if that issue comes up and it's recognized that this is really a problem everywhere, we're having this problem across the district, that can get reassigned over to this other group, however that group is formulated. That group can talk about it. That group might be able to come up with a solution that they can recommend to the board. And I've heard people say, why do we need this whole other group? Well, you can see we have a lot on our plate. We're here for a very long time, every time we have a meeting. We can share the load. These groups can share the load. They can work on issues that we can assign them stuff to work on. Study this for us and come back with a recommendation, and not necessarily have the burden be all completely on us and the administration. So you're getting kind of a agenda built. It's public. You can see what the issues are, what's coming in and out of them, and everybody's able to monitor, cross-monitor what's happening with these issues. Whether these groups are formed formally by edict from the board, or whether they're whether we simply say, look, we are encouraging you to form these. The Mount A group formed theirs without any encouragement from the board at all. And they're running perfectly fine, and they're very, very productive. But they don't really have an outlet to us. The teachers union right now would love to have a direct conversation with the board. Now, that has some issues with chain of authority and chain of command kind of problems. But in this model, they could be plugged into this district-wide group, and they could have a seat there, and they could be giving us their opinion in those in an advisory forum. And that discussion could be filtered by folks in order for it to be appropriate. I mean, if stuff comes up that isn't appropriate, we don't want that necessarily being publicly broadcast and chased around. There does need to be some responsibility taken for being productive. But the groups themselves can be more organically formed. They don't necessarily have to. This might actually be the way we kickstart them. Say, hey, we need a way to get going. So we're going to use this as the framework just to fire the gun and get the process moving, and then basically I'll give these groups the authority to set their schedule, set their agenda, set how they find new members or keep members, or change the percentage of staff to students to whatever, based on how they feel it best suits their local conditions. So that's the gist of the presentation. as Don said, we don't necessarily need to beat it to death tonight. I don't think we all just barely got a hold of it. I think it makes more sense to simply digest it as best you can and come up with your own issues and your own thoughts about it, talk about it.
The other point to remember is, and I may have missed it when I was passing out stuff, is that this was an advisory article in the articles of Act 46. So the committee debated it and put it in there as an article to consider the formation of these committees. And we had briefly talked about it in the beginning, but we didn't get very far, so this is another opportunity to dig in a little deeper. We have a little more information, so.
What do you mean by advisory article?
I think we made it as they knew that when we were talking about it, it wasn't a you must do this, it was that we valued the community input and having the community involved, and that we would consider advisory committees.
So it wasn't part of the warrant articles then? Is that
No,
what that
I
means?
don't think it was. I think it was outside of one article.
But definitely excited to think about it, and I also want to throw it out there that the community council at Mount Aid does not have representation from every town in many open positions, to the extent right now that they can't even, they have a whole list of proposals that people want to act on, students want to act on, and we don't have enough people to do it. So just if anybody is interested in getting engaged, I know it's not exactly like this, but it's powerful and important. So, you know.
Sarah.
I have a bunch of ideas, questions, thoughts. Thank you for putting this together in a visual. Where did I want to start? One, I wonder if how formal our first, besides Mount Aid, our first foray into this needs to be. So could we do, sometimes at school, we have a group test it out, like, oh, this advisory is gonna do ELPs this way, and then we're gonna see how it goes. And I'm wondering if, since there might be an immediate need for some things, if we wanted to try it out on a smaller scale, somewhere that was a less formal, or we could kind of dabble in what is effective. I've always really struggled in all this with the issue of either town or local. And so membership, I think, I don't know that needs to be a criteria. So I just want to throw that out there, that I think that's a little bit of a hang up for how we evolve or our boundary shift or things like that. But this could be really a powerful tool, and it could be really helpful with communication. I still always wonder about where, is this a need because there's really a lot of help that's needed at the principal level, and so, or is it a communication problem? So that, I guess I want to figure out what this is going to solve and make sure that that's how we utilize it. Because it could be multiple reasons, but I want to make sure we do it the right way. I think those are mine. And the election thing I find a little weird, I guess. I think it should be formal and informal in the same way. I don't know how to make that happen, but anyway, my thoughts.
All right.
We'll have this conversation again.
We will have this conversation again.
I appreciate it.
So jot down your thoughts and your questions, and we'll work through it again at another meeting. Okay.
Next is an update from the Community Engagement Committee. Just the meeting date? Yep. Is your meeting Zoom? Is that your Zoom? Okay. All right. Okay. We have some action, a legislative update, and Dave did send out a resolution. He did get limited responses back. So I didn't know, Dave, if you might have a recommendation for people?
So, thank you. I did send it out. I do have one copy here, which I can read from if people are interested in hearing details. Pardon?
It's also linked on the agenda.
Oh, good. It's also linked on the agenda. Wonderful. So I heard from two people. Both agreed with all the resolutions, except there was disagreement on the final one. So I guess I would start by saying, is there any other feedback from board members? Let's just start there. Is there any other feedback from board members?
Dave, I meant to send you a note, but I agreed with all.
You agree with all of them? Any other comments?
I do too, Dave. I agree with all of them.
Thank you, Andrew. Yes, Kevin.
Well,
Here's your.
oh, great. I disagree with the last one, which is the current process and how a replacement board member is selected in the interim. And when the school board leads and gets a recommendation basically from the town, and it just seems backwards to me that, the town elects an individual, if the individual resigns, seems like the town should be the ones that take the lead to fill that position, if I understand this resolution correctly. And we experienced a certain amount of awkwardness and uneasiness when we just recently replaced a person board member that had done. So I have a little bit of a reservation about this. Is there any other discussion about the sixth? That's the last resolution. Any other discussion? Yes? You're nodding your head?
Yeah, I support that because of the experience. Thinking about what we did, I agree with Kevin that the town could give us the, so I disagree, sorry.
Okay, any other comments on that last one? So maybe we'll do, seems like everyone's in agreement for the first five. Is that correct? Thumbs up or thumbs down? And then on number 6, why don't you give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down? If you agree, thumbs up. If you disagree, thumbs down. Okay, thank you. That's my feeling as well, and I'll express that. My biggest concern is the vagueness. I think what we've struggled with a lot is this notion of consultation. What the heck does that mean anyway? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
So, we haven't had an action item, so is everybody comfortable with that direction for Dave to go ahead and vote? Okay. Right. And then the next item was to share Nate's timeline, which arrived in an email, so we all got an email about that. It's going to be attached to the minutes. I did not print off a paper copy of that to go over it, but Nate has sent that out, and so that's what we can expect at this point. He said it is taking longer than he thought, but it's good because they're having a good conversation, and he thinks that's really valuable, so. Okay. All right.
We do need an executive session for two reasons. One, under Title I VSA 5, 313A1E, pending or probable civil litigation or prosecution to which the public body is or may be a party. And Title I VSA 5, 313A1B, labor relation agreements with employees. In order to enter into executive session on this, we have to determine that speaking about these subjects in the public setting would put us at a disadvantage first, and then we can move to go into executive session, having found that. So we have to explain the reason why talking about it in public session would put us at a disadvantage. Liz?
And I also wondered if we need to, are we planning on making a statement after as well, like if need to be, like if we could close on our own after?
So we do have an action item,
Okay.
but I'm anticipating this might take us a little while in executive session to have this discussion of two topics. Krista?
Given that, I don't know, it looks like somebody has their hand up. I don't know if we want to just ask if there's any public comment before we go in instead of making folks wait.
And then we could take our action and document it when we come out, and
they're welcome to wait, but.
And it would be captured in the minutes. Is that all right if I check in about public comment? I'm not sure whose hand is up, but is there some public comment? Okay, Herb.
Yeah, thanks. You know, I admire your stamina, perseverance. Long, Nate, a couple items. First, I think it's really important for the board to address the issue of whether a town has the right to vote before their school is closed. And I'm hoping that that will be on the next, the agenda of the next meeting. Second, discussion about the ends policies, I thought was certainly very interesting. Certainly commend the superintendent for acknowledging that the district is not in compliance. But I really don't want to focus on the superintendent. I think the real issue is what board plans to do. And, you know, this is not a new issue. It came up a couple of years ago. Last year we passed on it. Frankly, you know, nothing's changed in terms of this particular issue for a couple of decades. So, and ultimately, it's really not the superintendent's issue. It's really the board's issue. The board makes policy here. And the board has a policy that I think establishes some very reasonable and good goals. But frankly, you know, if you keep with the policy and accepting the compliance plan year after year, nothing's going to change. I think the board has to really consider whether its policy is adequate to the task, to the goals that you want to set, that you're setting. And the ends goals might be, I think, are very decent. They're very high level. The board under policy governance has certainly the right, if not the obligation, to dig deeper than that and specify exactly what their expectations are around student achievement, whether all students, disadvantaged students, special needs students. These are your responsibilities. I think you need to seriously look at what your policy is and set more specific expectations for the administration. Right now, the administration really sets its own expectations. What are your expectations? It's your responsibility. And I think you need to, I think you've done a fine job, but you know, you've been taught, you've been instructed, this is the framework that you should be using. And I don't think that that's what policy governance is all about. I think you need to delve deeper into the specifics so that your expectations are reflected in policy, and the policy is specific in terms of what is expected and when it needs to expected, when it needs to be done. And that's not the case right now. So I hope you would pay attention to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Herb. Anyone else on Zoom? Okay. Same.
Sorry. I'm doing this in public comment only because I missed it when we were making comment. I wanted to thank Steve for putting this chart together on these different loops of getting community councils together. And I know Nancy's work, she was here earlier in the past, because I didn't know there was this kind of detail on how to try to effectuate, this piece. And so there's no doubt that I'm going to spend some time looking carefully at it and definitely giving more input, but I definitely support, the systems that are out there and how we can try to adopt some of them in the future.
Thank you, Steve. All right, while we're in this part, Chris, could you run through the board evaluation, and then if you don't want to wait, you can go as well. You want the microphone?
Oh, no. Sorry. So, what is the level of engagement of all board members, high or low? High. Was the agenda followed? Yes or no?
Yes.
Any comments?
One item added.
Does the chair effectively establish the agenda and materials for distribution to the board? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Any comments?
I'd like to just make a comment. If there is ever possible to see documents before the meeting, this is not an uncommon thing, like the budget presentation, that just really helped me generate questions. I feel like I'm given the lesson and then I'm like tested. That's not how I learn. I have to sit there and digest this stuff. So we could keep trying to improve that process. And even for me, if it's 24 hours before, that's when I usually get a chance to look at the agenda. So that'd be appreciated.
Is the chair effective in fostering a professional culture regarding fair and open deliberation, full participation of all members, and ensuring the integrity of the board process? Yes or no?
Yes.
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 Comments? Other feedback for the chair?
Only that we went way over time, but not surprisingly, a lot of stuff to do.
Just put 6 p.m. and then a question mark
Yeah.
for every box.
Exactly.
What went well with the meeting?
You got to talk to principal, really see the school in a different location.
I'll second that.
I liked having it back on my chair. Couldn't take it anymore.
We had Dana, I can't remember his last name.
Yeah.
Dana showed up from the Career Center too.
What suggestions do you have for ways to improve future meetings?
I was just thinking it would be great if we could have our ends report a standalone meeting.
I was thinking that too, that the retreat would be, a retreat setting would be more of a time to dig in and understand. And I know that the data collection goes around that, but maybe we should think about in a retreat setting to take that on. This is a frequent October.
There's a lot to do this month.
Yeah.
But you're right, the state assessment results would not be available in August. I'm pushing it right now, actually. The state hasn't released their statement either.
There's something that would stop us from having a mini retreat or
Yeah,
a 4-hour day or something. just committing to it. So
Fully support that, I think it's a great idea.
we have to work it into the work plan ahead of time, so we wouldn't just say, hey, by the way, guess what?
With the ability to ask some questions before, get the material, and we did get the end material, maybe a process where we could ask some questions before the actual retreat.
Work on that. All right, thank you. Okay, so now we're back to in need of this executive session. I can say, since the topic is on pending or probable civil litigation, we certainly would not want to be discussing if we were involved in a lawsuit in public session for fear that something we might say might cause a problem proceeding forward. So in that case, I would say that talking about it in public session would put us at a disadvantage. And as far as labor relations agreements, we have not had a chance to understand where we all are on this subject and what we would like to do. So we need some time to have a frank discussion amongst ourselves about our position or non-position or whatever stand we are taking together. So having it out in public session, kind of gives everybody a chance to hear it before we have a chance to work through it and come to a sort of agreement on where we are. So if you have other ideas why it might put us at a disadvantage, you can certainly consider those in that motion.
Can we make a motion to
That-
go into executive session? That
So
it would put us at a
make-
disadvantage.
Right, that talking about these two topics would put us at a disadvantage.
So moved.
Who is that? Oh, Sandy. All right. Okay, is there a second?
Second. I thought I moved.
All right,
Second
all right. All those in agreement that speaking about these two subjects in public session would put us at a disadvantage, the district at a disadvantage, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Given that finding, we're gonna need to go into executive session, and we need to invite Patrick, Katrina, and Floyd to join us.
So moved.
Steve?
I second.
Sandy? All right, so we will go in at 10:16. When we come out, we will, yeah, we are. I'm gonna just tell everybody, when we come out, we have an action item that if somebody can jot down and we can just send it in to, Liz, are you willing to do that? Okay, then we'll just, Chris, if you wanna go, you can go, and then we'll do that. So all those in favor of going into executive session under those two, at 10:16 with Katrina, Floyd, and Patrick, please say aye.
Aye. Can we do it here?
I'm sorry?
Can we do it here?
Well, Sean's got to take down the camera, so it'd probably be quicker if we moved.